What if Snape defected from the Death Eaters before betraying the Potters? Cold open in the shifting alley, a spy about to break. The alley is a throat of darkness, slick with rain and old magic. Sound moves strangely here. It slides along the wet stones, curls under doorways, vanishes into brick. Winter of the War. A side street off Nocturne Alley, close enough to feel the pulse of the underworld, far enough that no one respectable will ever admit it exists. Severus Snape stands in the narrowest part of the passage, back to the wall, cloak soaked through, hair plastered to his face. He listens. He has been planning this, and still his hands will not stop shaking. The world around him is a collage of small, sharp noises. The hiss of distant flue flames as someone, somewhere, steps out of a fireplace in a hurry. The clink of glass from a shuttered shop. A muffled scream that rises, thins, and cuts off as if a wand has been pressed to a throat. Water drips steadily from a broken gutter, counting seconds he does not have. He breathes in, regrets it. The air tastes of ash and something metallic, a tang that clings to the back of his tongue. Blood. Old, half-washed from the cobbles, and new, copper bright and close. It is in the rain, in the mortar, in the threads of his cloak. It is in everything. His right hand is hidden inside his sleeve, wrapped around his wand. His left is buried in his pocket, fingers digging into a folded scrap of parchment. The edges are already softened from being held too often. The crease down the center is perfect, obsessive, a line pressed again and again until the fibers almost split. He cannot seem to let it go. He knows every stroke of the ink without looking. He has read these few lines until they are carved into him, until the letters might as well be written along the veins in his wrist. He does not need to unfold it to see the words. He still does not release it. Bootsteps echo at the mouth of the alley, then fade away. Not the measured, confident walk he is waiting for. Not yet. He shifts deeper into shadow, the rough brick scraping his shoulders, cloak whispering against stone. The wand in his sleeve is a rigid line against his skin, a promise and a threat. Ahead, the alley forks. To the left, it descends, bending out of sight into thicker dark. That way lies the world he has walked for years now. Basement doors with no signs, staircases that go down instead of up, back rooms where curses are traded like coin, and names are spoken only once. The path shines faintly, with the greenish sheen of spilt potion, oil, something that has eaten the color from the stones. To the right, almost invisible unless one knows to look, is a door. A pub door, narrow and warped, its paint the color of old parchment. No sign swings above it. No light spills out, only a thin line of gold shows, where the frame does not quite meet the jamb, a hesitant glow like candlelight behind a curtain. It looks wrong here, wrong in a way that makes the hair on his arms rise. This is not a door for the kind of man he has become. This is not where his mark would lead him. Another sound, closer now. A soft scuff of a shoe on wet stone. A breath caught and released. The alley holds itself still, listening with him. He looks once toward the left-hand path, where the dark seems to lean forward, welcoming. He looks toward the faint line of light. They look at each other, the shadow and the door, and he stands between them, every choice he has made pressing down on his spine. His fingers tighten around the parchment until it crumples. That, more than any description could contain, is the only warning he gives himself. Then he turns his back on the darker way and walks toward the lighted door. Each step an act of quiet treason, every instinct screaming that this is a mistake, that someone will see, that there will be no going back. He does not pause. He does not yet know who waits on the other side, or how this single decision will reach lives he has never touched, in houses he has never seen, rewriting a war that has not finished beginning, anchoring the timeline, where we diverge from canon. The door opens on a different war than the one we know. Late 1979. Some nights, very early 1980. Britain is grey and watchful. The First Wizarding War is not yet legend, not yet a story told in classrooms. It is a list of disappearances in the Prophet, a curfew in certain streets, a mark that flares on arms in the dark. Voldemort is rising, not fallen. Godric's Hollow is just another village. No one has heard a prophecy. In canon, this is the period when Severus Snape has already made his choice. Hogwarts is behind him, a castle of humiliations and almosts. He walks out of school and into Voldemort's ranks, drawn by the dark arts he has studied for years, by Slytherin contacts who speak of power and respect, by the promise that he will never again be the boy from Spinner's End. He has been planning this since 5th year, collecting curses, brewing poisons, shaping himself into something dangerous enough that no one will laugh. By now, Voldemort values him, a thin, pale wizard with a gift for curses that unmake bone, and a mind that can take a half-remembered recipe and turn it into a weapon. He is used as a brewer, an inventor, an interrogator. He is not yet the famous double agent. He is simply one of the Dark Lord's most efficient tools. He still hates James Potter with a precision honed over a decade. He is still haunted by Lily Evans, by the memory of green eyes that once looked at him with trust and then with hurt. In the original timeline, it will be another year, at least, before Sybil Trelawney's voice cracks in the Hog's head, and a younger Snape, listening at the door, hears half a prophecy that will damn a child. That night has not happened. Dumbledore has not yet offered him a bargain. There is no boy who lived waiting on the far side of a curse. Here is where we diverge. In this story, the breaking point comes early. Not after the prophecy, not after he realizes what Voldemort intends for Lily, but before. A mission that goes wrong, an order he cannot obey, a torture he cannot watch again. The details belong to the next section, but the result is simple. He walks away first. He defects to Dumbledore before he ever steps into the Hog's head, which means he never carries that fatal fragment of words back to his master. From this moment on, we stay close to him. The narrative lens settles behind his eyes as he walks from one world into another, from masked meetings to the quiet, suspicious rooms of the Order of the Phoenix. We will cut away, to James and Lily in their cottage, to Sirius pacing headquarters, to Voldemort recalculating his spy network, but we return, again and again, to the man who has changed sides too soon. He looks at her. She looks at him. A moment of understanding passes between them in Dumbledore's office, and nothing in this war will move along quite the same lines. The core promise is this: without Snape delivering the prophecy, Voldemort never marks the Potters in that specific, surgical way. Godric's Hollow is not chosen as a stage for destiny. There is no Halloween night that leaves a baby in the ruins, and a legend in the papers. Harry grows up with his parents, in a house that stays standing, in a world where his scar is only a possibility. And Severus Snape, who once built his life on a single catastrophic mistake, must now live with a different burden, loyalty chosen early, guilt that comes from what he still allows to happen, and a future in which he cannot hide behind the role of penitent spy. The war will still come for them. It always does. But the shape of it, the way it looks when it reaches their door, will be more than any description could contain. Who is this Snape? Reframing his inner war before the prophecy. The room is dark and smells of ash and metal. A single lamp, greenish and low, swings above a scarred table. Years before the prophecy, this is Severus Snape's world. He walks into it without hesitation, black robes whispering, wand at his wrist, mind already cataloguing ingredients, and exits. He has been planning this life since 5th year, since the first time a Slytherin's 7th year whispered about the Dark Lord, as if speaking of a distant, inevitable storm. Missions in 2s and 3s. Small cells apparating to nameless fields, to back alleys, to the edges of Muggle towns. Long nights brewing in hidden basements, cauldrons lined like soldiers, steam rising in thin, poisonous veils. He is good at this. Too good. They know it. They send him formulae half-finished, curses half-theorized, and he completes them, his quill racing over parchment until dawn. There is an intoxicating sense of finally belonging, of power humming in his veins, where school humiliation once sat like a stone. No James Potter here to dangle him upside down. No Sirius Black's laugh cutting through him. Only masked men who call him Severus with a certain dry respect when the antidote works, and the victim dies exactly on time. But the cracks begin early. A raid that is supposed to be a warning turns into a spectacle. A Muggle-born man, dragged from his cottage, is tortured long after he has given them everything he knows. The screams do not stop when the information does. Severus stands at the edge of the circle, mask hiding his face. and watches a fellow Death Eater carve meaningless patterns into the man's arm simply because he can. Ideology dissolves. What remains looks like sport. Another night, a girl not much older than he had been at Hogwarts begs for her wand back. They laugh. They do not need her wand to break her. He hears her sobs, and, unbidden, another voice overlays them. Lily Evans, furious at Mulciber in 5th year, defending a Muggleborn who never even knew her name. He sees again the way she stepped between predator and target without thinking, her hair a bright banner in the corridor light. Later, alone in his narrow room, he pulls out a folded, stained piece of parchment, a half-finished letter. He has been planning this apology for years without sending it. Lily I. The sentence breaks where his courage always does. Ink blotted, never resumed. He looks at the blank space and hears, in memory, his own slur thrown at her by the lake. The contrast is a wound that never quite scars. Inside Voldemort's ranks, he is both valued and disposable. Respected for his mind, never fully trusted. Some pure-bloods mock him softly when they think he cannot hear. Half-blood hissed like an accusation. The Dark Lord praises his potions, his curses, his precision, but never his name. Severus knows, with the cold clarity of a man who has read too many old grimoires, that in this hierarchy talent is a resource, not a shield. Then, one evening, in a smoky drawing room, he hears Lily's name. Casual, in passing, as part of a list of blood traitors associated with the Order. Potter's mudblood wife. The words land like a hex. The war, which has been an abstract board of moves and counters, suddenly walks straight through his chest. If this is not the future he imagined, what is he willing to sacrifice to change it? And is there anyone left who would even believe him when he finally knocks on a different door? The breaking point mission, when Snape finally sees too much. The house is quiet, except for the breathing. Too fast, too shallow. A child's breathing. 3 nights after the list with Lily's name lands in his hand like a curse, Severus walks behind a squad of masked figures toward a narrow lane on the edge of Leeds. Brick terraces, thin curtains. The kind of Muggle street he grew up on. Except this one hides a mixed blood family suspected of sheltering Muggleborns and passing letters for the Order. He tells himself he is here as an ingredient, not a blade. He has been planning this distance for months, cultivating the role. The quiet brewer, the one who stands near the back, who carries satchels and vials and stabilizes curses when they threaten to eat their own casters. Tonight the pretext is a new serum, more precise than Veritaserum, designed to strip memories from the edges inward until only what the Dark Lord wants remains. Snape holds the case that contains it. His hand does not shake. That frightens him more than if it did. Inside, the house looks painfully ordinary. Stacked schoolbooks. A chipped teapot. A wizarding photograph of a woman laughing as a little girl chases a toy broom in a tiny back garden. The girl is here now, half hidden behind the woman's robes. Eyes huge. The woman's hair is dark, not red, but the shape of her face is close enough that something in him stutters. He looks away. He cannot. The father has already surrendered, wand on the floor, hands raised. It does not matter. A curse takes his knee apart for the hesitation of not kneeling fast enough. Another Death Eater laughs. They move with the casual certainty of men who know the world will never hold them to account. Snape is ordered to prepare the serum for the mother, who is said to know the names of 2 Order couriers. He uncaps the vial. The liquid inside is clear, viscous, smelling faintly of crushed lovage and something metallic. He has brewed it to specification. He has also brewed in a separate ampoule tucked against his wrist, a counteragent that will cloud short-term recall and slow the serum's spread if introduced in time. He looks at the girl. She looks at him. A moment of understanding passes between them, or he imagines it because he needs to. Her hands clutch the hem of her mother's robes the way Lily once clutched her books when boys jeered at her in Cokeworth. Terror and a stubborn refusal to cry. The command comes, proceed. Another voice, almost bored, adds a second instruction. When the questioning is done, kill them both. No witnesses, no half measures. The words are tossed out like one more item on a shopping list. This, Severus realizes, is not strategy. This is appetite. Something in him snaps with a sound he feels in his teeth. There will be no line. Not for children. Not for surrender. Not even for those who look like ghosts of the only person who ever believed he could be more than this. He moves as he always does, efficient, precise. Draws the dose. Tilts the woman's chin. As the drop falls, his thumb shifts, just enough to smear the counteragent against her lower lip. It is a tiny act, buried inside obedience. The serum will work, but sluggishly, her memories will blur at the edges, leaving gaps the right legilimens might later follow back. When he is told to bind the girl, he ties the ropes too loosely and leaves the back door ward a fraction misaligned, a hairline crack in the shell of protections. To anyone else, meaningless. To an order cursebreaker following a desperate tip, a visible seam. Hours later, walking away from the house as screams echo behind him, Severus knows it is not enough. A slowed poison is still a poison. One rescued family will not balance the ledger of all the others. If he stays, he will learn to stop flinching, or he will die in a cellar no one ever finds. He has been planning this, he realizes, without admitting it to himself. Every quiet note about patrol routes, every observation about who commands which raids, every moment he looks at the Dark Lord and imagines describing him to someone who does not yet trust him. Tonight, the imagining hardens into decision. By the time the mark on his arm cools, Severus Snape has already chosen his next walk, up a different hill, to a different door, where a man he despises will weigh his soul like a potion ingredient and decide whether this small act of treason is the beginning of something larger, or merely too late. Dumbledore's door. The first treasonous conversation. The door again. Black wood, no sign. A thin line of light around the frame like a spell drawn with a shaking hand. Severus stands in the alley, cloak damp with mist, the mark on his arm a dull ache instead of fire. He has been planning this for weeks, measuring routes, faces, escape paths, walking past this same hidden pub door 3 nights in a row, and not touching it. Tonight he does, his fingers close around the handle. It is colder than the air. Inside, the room is small, low-ceilinged, smelling of ash and old ale. No customers. Only a single hearth and a man behind the bar who does not look up. The risky intermediary has already done his work. A whispered name in Nocturne. A coded letter passed through a half-blood contact in the bank. A promise that there is one man in the world willing to listen if you truly mean to betray the Dark Lord. The barman jerks his chin toward the fireplace. A pinch of grey powder, a destination spoken once and never repeated in any of Voldemort's councils. Severus steps into green flame and is pulled out of London, out of the familiar web of wards and patrols, into a neutral room that smells of beeswax and old parchment. Stone walls, a round table, no banners, no phoenix, only Albus Dumbledore, standing, not sitting, hands folded loosely, blue eyes not twinkling at all. Dumbledore looks at him the way Iron Scale looked at Harry and Hermione in Gringotts in another story, weighing, cataloguing, reserving judgment. He sees the black sleeves, the wand hand, the slight tremor at the corner of Severus's mouth. He also sees the faint outline of the mark through the fabric, blood on his hands, and more than any description could contain. Severus, Dumbledore says. No welcome. No chair pulled out. You asked for this meeting. Speak. So he does not begin with remorse. He begins with names. Dolohov's current safe house outside Bristol. The Lestrange's rotation schedule between raids and rituals. A list of brewing assignments for the next full moon. Blood-thickening draughts. Pain enhancers. A new binding agent for experimental curses. He sketches the outline of an upcoming attack on a minor ministry records office that Voldemort believes holds copies of old blood inheritance registries. Dumbledore listens. He does not interrupt. When Severus pauses, he only asks, "How do I know you are not my enemy's most gifted liar?" "Because I am a better brewer than I am an actor," Severus answers, dry as old parchment. "Test me. Verify everything. You will find it accurate." Dumbledore nods once, as if he expected that answer, and will not reward it. There will be conditions, magical oaths, binding you from returning to his service, Veritaserum interviews, administered by more than one order member. You will not choose your assignments. You will be used where you are most effective, not where you are most comfortable. Do you understand? Severus inclines his head. A tool then, not a friend. He had not truly expected more. And you must know, Dumbledore adds quietly, this does not erase what you have already done. I did not come for absolution. Dumbledore studies him for a long moment. He looks tired, older than the portraits make him seem. Then why now? He asks. You have walked in darkness for years. Why step toward the light tonight, and not last month? Or next? Severus's throat works. Lily's name rises like bile. He sees her laughing in a school corridor, wand in hand, red hair bright against stone. He sees her world, their world, on fire under Voldemort's rule, Muggleborns hunted, old houses twisted, children sorted only into fear and obedience. He looks at Dumbledore. Dumbledore looks at him. A moment of understanding passes between them, thin and fragile as spun glass. Because, Severus says, and the word hangs there, heavy with everything he cannot yet confess. I have seen what he plans for those who would stand in his way. And there is one witch I will not watch, burn. Dumbledore's eyes sharpen. Lily Evans, he says, not a question. Severus does not answer. He does not need to. The silence is its own oath, and somewhere far from this room, in a cottage that does not yet know it is in danger, a different future shivers, waiting to be written. Terms of a traitor, how the Order handles an early defector. The room is smaller this time. No silver instruments, no lemon drops, just stone walls and a single chair bolted to the floor. Severus sits in it, wrists free but wand gone. Moody's magical eye ticking and whirring as if it can see through bone. Dumbledore stands near the door, not behind a desk now, but within arm's reach, as though that matters against a killing curse. He has been planning this since the moment Severus said Lily's name without saying it. The vetting is not one conversation. It is a campaign. Veritaserum first, brewed by Dumbledore himself, the clear liquid measured with a precision that looks almost tender. 3 drops on the tongue, Moody watching, wand drawn. Names, missions, passwords. Who recruited him? Which raids he planned, which he merely watched? They cross, check everything against what the Order already knows, against ministry reports, against the half-burnt letters recovered from ruined homes. When the potion wears off, legitimacy begins. Dumbledore's gaze settles, the room seems to narrow. Severus feels his mind pulled open, old corridors lit whether he wills it or not. Green light, laughter, a girl on a riverbank turning away from him. They do not trust his words alone. They test memory against memory, fact against fact, looking for the hairline fractures of manipulation. Word of his presence spreads faster than any official announcement. The next meeting at the safe house is louder, sharper. Moody does not bother to hide his fury. You want to keep a Death Eater in the cellar and call it strategy? He growls. You know what they did to the Bones family? Gideon Pruitt slams his hand on the table. Fabian's chair scrapes back. They have seen friends fall. And here is the man who brewed the poisons that made some of those deaths possible. Even James, leaning against the far wall, arms folded, looks at Severus with a caution that is more than schoolboy hatred now. He remembers hexes in corridors, the word mudblood hanging in the air like smoke. He also remembers Lily insisting that people can change. He looks at her. She looks at him. A moment of understanding passes between them, complicated and unfinished. Dumbledore's compromise is cold, almost bureaucratic. Severus will not sit in the inner circle. He will not know every safe house, every mission. He becomes a controlled informant, moved between wards like a dangerous artifact. His movements are monitored, his reports filtered through Moody and Dumbledore, his access to Order members restricted to brief, supervised briefings. He walks a narrow corridor between 2 wars, too useful to discard, too compromised to trust. Dumbledore's moral calculus shows in the lines around his eyes. The war is tilting toward Voldemort, Aura's dead, families vanished, and one man who knows the inner workings of the Dark Lord's circle is worth almost more than any description could contain. But one misplaced trust could doom everyone. And at the heart of it, a fracture the Order refuses to smooth over. Severus wants Lily safe. Lily and, by extension, the small family she has built with James in a cottage that still laughs. He offers routes, wards, counter, curses tailored to her protection, with a precision that betrays how long he has been planning this in his own mind. The Order listens, takes what helps, but will not pivot its entire strategy around one witch. How could they, when the whole magical world is burning? That refusal plants the seed of the central tension. Severus measures every request against Lily's safety. The Order measures every move against the war as a whole. They look at each other across that divide, both needing the other, neither fully yielding. It is an alliance built on necessity, on half-truths and monitored corridors, and it cannot hold forever. Somewhere, far from this argument, wards around Godric's Hollow flicker as plans begin to shift, just a fraction, toward a future that should not have been possible. Voldemort, without his prince, the Dark Lord reacts to a vanishing asset. The room is quiet and full of waiting. No one speaks Voldemort's name. Late autumn, somewhere in Britain, in a house that used to belong to a Muggle family who will never walk through its door again. A long table. Masks on the wood, fingers drumming, the faint burn of the dark mark like a storm on the horizon. Severus Snape is missing. He has been planning this meeting for days. At least that is what the lower ranks believe. A report. A new curse. Some clever twist of potions that will make the next raid cleaner, faster, more precise. Instead, the mark has gone unanswered twice, and the third summons comes back like a stone thrown into deep water. No ripple. No Snape. They look at each other, trying not to look worried. Malsiba mutters that Aurors must have caught him. Avery insists Snape is on some secret errand, too important to share. One of the Lestrange brothers suggests, with a thin, delighted smile, that perhaps their half-blood scholar finally brewed something he could not control. The speculation moves around the table in low, nervous currents. No one knows anything. No one wants to be the first to say the word traitor. When Voldemort comes, the room freezes. He looks at the empty chair as if it is a puzzle, not an insult. His anger is not a shout. It is an absence of warmth, a narrowing of attention. Questions, soft and precise. When was Severus last seen? Who handled potions with him? Which cells depended on his curse work? He has been planning this war for years, and now one of his most useful pieces has simply vanished. Quiet orders follow. Yaxley is told to audit every potion Snape brewed for them in the last 6 months. Dolohov is sent to test the loyalty of Snape's known associates in Nocturne Alley, one by one, with questions and carefully calibrated pain. A masked pair is dispatched to the small cottage where Snape was supposed to sleep between missions. They return with dust, empty vials, and a sense that the man left on his own terms. The practical loss becomes clear within weeks. A planned infiltration of St. Mungo's collapses when no one can reproduce Snape's non-traceable sleeping draught. A subtle hex meant to rot broom handles mid-flight is shelved because the only wizard who truly understood its layered structure is gone. Raids that might have been surgical become blunt. More fire. More bodies. Less elegance. Inside the ranks, suspicion blooms. Bellatrix laughs too loudly when Snape's name is mentioned, calls him bookish, tainted. Always more in love with his cauldrons than the cause. Others, quieter. Imagine him in Dumbledore's office, pouring out everything. Names, safe houses, the exact composition of the poisons they thought undetectable. A moment of understanding passes between them. Any of them could be next under that invisible scrutiny. Voldemort watches this fear, weighs it, and makes a decision. He will not let one man, even a gifted one, define the pace of his rise. If Snape is with Dumbledore, then whatever damage he can do must be drowned under something larger, faster, more terrible. Accelerate the war plan. Strike at families, at the ministry, at the fragile trust that holds the magical world together. Move so quickly that any warning Snape carries will always arrive a step too late. Somewhere far away, in a cottage protected by altered wards, James Potter feels a chill he cannot name, and Lily looks up from her notes on defensive charms. He looks at her. She looks at him. The future has shifted again, in ways more than any description could contain. The Potters in the crossfire, life in the war before any prophecy. The cottage is quiet, but not still. Wards hum in the walls like a second heartbeat. Godric's Hollow. Late autumn. A small stone house at the edge of the village, ivy on the outside, layered protections on the inside. The front hall tells the story before anyone speaks. James's invisibility cloak folded but not hidden on a peg. Lily's wand resting in a narrow dish by the door. A scuffed pair of dragonhide boots kicked half under the stair. This is not a place of hiding. This is a staging ground. In the kitchen, the table is almost lost beneath parchment. Maps of Britain, of Europe, of tiny wizarding enclaves annotated in 3 different hands. Circles around suspected safe houses. Crosses through known Death Eater gathering spots. A list of Muggle-born families written in Lily's precise script, with addresses, ward strengths, and a column labelled simply, at risk. A kettle steams on the hob, forgotten. The cottage looks like home and headquarters at once. James leans over one of the maps, one tapping a route between Diagon Alley and a coastal village. He has been planning this run for days, a reconnaissance sweep with Sirius and the Pruitt brothers, checking rumours of a new recruitment cell. He walks the path with his eyes, tracing apparition points, likely ambush sites, escape vectors. He has been planning this the way he plans every mission now, as if one mistake will cost more than his own life. Lily sits opposite him, ink on her fingers, hair twisted up and already escaping. She is drafting a new layering sequence for Muggle electrical systems and magical wards, trying to stop a pattern of attacks where Death Eaters cut the power before striking. Her notes are dense, full of counter-curses, anti-tracking charms, ways to hide magical signatures in a world of streetlights and telephones. Somewhere on the table, a letter from a terrified Muggle-born mother lies half open, its edges softened from being read too many times. They look at each other when the clock on the mantel chimes 9. A moment of understanding passes between them. James is thinking of the last raid, of Fabian Pruitt laughing as curses flew, of the silence afterward. Lily is thinking of the girl who wrote that letter, of a family that does not know the word Voldemort, but feels his shadow anyway. They do not say Severus's name, not tonight, but his absence hangs there. Dumbledore's briefing 2 days earlier lingers in Lily's mind, a new informant, unnamed, whose tip redirected an order patrol and kept them from walking into a slaughter. She heard the careful way Dumbledore spoke, the way his eyes flicked to her, then away. She knows that cadence. She has known him since Spinner's End. James caught it too, and resented it. Another Slytherin, another risk, another man from Lily's past threaded into their present. He looks at her. She looks at him. He does not ask, "Do you think it's him?" She does not answer. If it is, he has already saved you once. In the bedroom, a tiny pair of blue booties sits on a dresser, next to a book of baby names with 3 pages de-geared. Lily's hand strays to her stomach more often now, an unconscious gesture, protective and wondering at once. They have not told many people. The ward does not feel like a place where new life belongs, and yet here it is, quietly insisting. Later, when the maps are stacked and the kettle finally poured, they sit on the sagging sofa under a patchwork blanket. The wards flicker once as a patrol passes overhead, then settle. James's arm is around her shoulders. Her head rests against his chest. The question comes out in a low voice, almost casual. Do you think we'll see it? Peace. A world where their child walks to Hogwarts without fear. Lily listens to his heartbeat, to the faint thrum of magic in the walls. We have to, she says. It is an answer and a refusal to imagine anything else. Outside, the wind presses against the wards and fails. Somewhere beyond the village, a man in black robes walks away from everything he has ever sworn to serve, carrying secrets that could redraw the war. The Potters do not know his choice yet. But before the night is over, the war will look back at this cottage and begin to move its pieces. First fruits of treason. How Snape's intel starts to bend the war. The first message arrives as a smudge of ink and a change in Dumbledore's eyes. No thunder, no proclamation. Just a folded scrap carried by a small, exhausted owl that looks as if it has flown through a storm no one else can see. He has been planning this. Snape's notes are clipped, almost clinical. A safe house in Derbyshire marked for cleansing. 3 Muggle-born families, 2 children under 5. Window wards designed to fail inward, not out. Apparition jammers keyed to panic magic. Dumbledore reads, once, twice, then passes the letter to Moody without comment. Trap, Moody growls, or double trap. Precisely why we will not send everyone, Dumbledore says. His voice is mild, but he is already walking, already sorting names in his mind the way other men sort coins at Gringotts. Test the source. Preserve the board. Never move a queen when a knight will do. The order goes in thin. Moody, Emmeline, a young Edgar Bones. Lily and James as backup, stationed 2 streets away with portkeys humming against their wrists. James jokes, quietly, about always missing the fun. Lily does not laugh. She looks at the dark windows and thinks of a boy with ink-stained fingers who once sat beside her in a different world. Inside the house, the pattern is textbook Death Eater terror. Snape has laid it out in chilling detail, how they like to herd families into corners, how they layer Cruciatus in silence, how they time the dark mark to coincide with the first scream. He names names. Mulciber, Rosier, Alecto. Each syllable is a cut. He knows that every accurate description is another stone on the path that might lead to their capture, or their deaths. The counter-ambush works, but not cleanly. 2 Death Eaters down, one stunned and dragged away, one disapparating through a crack in the jammers with half an arm left behind. Moody loses part of an ear. Edgar's shield shatters like glass. The families live. The mark never rises. Lily and James never see the attackers. Their portkeys never trigger. They walk home under a sky that is just a sky, unaware that a man they have not forgiven has bent the night around them. They only hear, later, that someone is feeding Dumbledore information. A mysterious source. A traitor on the inside. Hope he keeps talking, James says, half ironic, half prayer. So do I. She looks at him. He looks at her. A moment of understanding passes between them, more than any description could contain. Weeks later, another letter. A planned massacre at a Muggle-born clinic in London. Healers and children targeted for maximum fear. Again, Dumbledore sends a small team, with a second team hidden in the alley behind, and a third watching for aura interference. Again, Snape's knowledge of their entry points, their preferred curses, the way they layer anti-Muggle notice charms, turns chaos into something survivable. Not winnable. Not yet. But survivable. Slowly, the war's texture shifts. Raids that should have been effortless become costly. Safe houses do not fall on schedule. Whispers spread through the order that the tide is turning, just a little. In Death Eater ranks, paranoia thickens. Someone knows too much. Someone has seen everything. And in a cold room far from Godric's Hollow, Voldemort pauses over his own maps, his own careful plans, and begins to redraw the war. Pattern interrupt. A world without the prophecy's shadow. The room is quiet. Only the rustle of parchment, the slow movement of a quill. In another world, a different quill scratched in a smoky upstairs room of the Hog's Head. Sybil Trelawney swayed, eyes blank, voice not her own. A prophecy dropped like a stone into still water. A child born as the 7th month dies. Power the Dark Lord knows not. Either must die at the hand of the other. Snape, hood up, listened at the door. He has been planning this. Another small service for his master. He caught only half, ran to Voldemort, and the rest of the story wrote itself in blood. In that world, Voldemort looks at his map and does not see countries. He sees nurseries. 2 families fit the words. Longbottom, Potter. He chooses the one whose father defied him 3 times, walks into Godric's Hollow, and marks a baby with a curse that rebounds. Harry becomes the boy who lived, a symbol first and a person second, a walking Horcrux, carrying a piece of Voldemort's soul like shrapnel lodged too deep to see. Everything after bends around that night. Dumbledore's plans coil around a scar. The Order's hope hangs on a child who does not know his own name. Even Snape's redemption is chained to a single scream in a ruined house. Now the pattern interrupts. The Hog's Head is only a shabby pub. Trelawney's interview is dull, or never happens, or her inner voice stays silent. Snape never walks that corridor as a Death Eater spy, because in this timeline, he has already walked into Dumbledore's office instead. There is no listening at doors, no half-heard sentence carried to a snake-faced lord. So the prophecy never reaches Voldemort. Perhaps it is never spoken at all. The war loses that sharp, glittering point of destiny. and becomes something broader, heavier. Without a chosen child to fear, Voldemort's gaze stays on the present, not the cradle. He refines his raids, tightens his grip on the Ministry, hunts the Order as a pack of dangerous adults rather than as guardians of some future nemesis. He wants power everywhere, not insurance against a baby he has never seen. For James and Lily, the air changes. They are still targets, brilliant, defiant, too visible in every skirmish. But there is no whispered line about a child born as the 7th month dies to turn their cottage into the center of the world. No secret Fidelius built around a date on a healer's chart. Their fear is ordinary wartime fear. Ambush on the road, a raid gone wrong, a friend who talks under the wrong curse. Harry's future does not arrive pre-marked. He looks at her, she looks at him. In this version of events, when they argue about safety, about hiding, about fighting, it is not because some unseen script demands their son be protected at all costs. It is because they are young and stubborn and love each other more than any description could contain. The stakes shift. Without a prophecy, there is no chosen one, only chosen actions. The war's fulcrum is not a riddle in Trelawney's voice, but a set of decisions. Snape's defection, Dumbledore's willingness to trust him, the Potter's refusal to disappear quietly. Survival becomes a matter of strategy, timing, and chance instead of fate. And that means the next move in this world, who lives, who dies, who walks into the light, and who stays in the dark, will be decided by people who believe they are unremarkable, not by a line in a dusty record. For Voldemort, that is far more dangerous. They look at each other, across battle lines and kitchen tables, and the story begins to bend for reasons no seer ever named. Snape and Lily, an uneasy orbit around old wounds. The room is small and high-windowed, full of dust and late afternoon light. A week earlier, Lily hears about him without hearing his name. Dumbledore's voice is low in the kitchen at Godric's Hollow, speaking over the clink of teacups. A former Death Eater has turned. He is providing crucial intelligence on raids, safe houses, the Dark Lord's movements. Lives are being saved. James asks who. Dumbledore does not answer. He only looks at Lily for a heartbeat too long. She knows. Of course she knows. There were not many boys in their year who could brew a perfect draught of living death at 15, or walk the edge between brilliance and cruelty like it was the most natural thing in the world. The knowledge settles in her like a stone in water, sinking through layers of memory. A skinny boy under a tree by the lake. The hissed slur that cut their friendship. The mark she refused to see on his arm, even when rumors began to harden into fact. Gratitude comes first, traitorous and sharp. If his information stopped the ambush on the Bones family, if that tip about the warehouse in Cardiff pulled auras in time, then children are alive because of him. Then fury rises to meet it. Fury at the years he spent on the other side, at the choices he made with clear eyes, at the way he looked at her that night and still chose the word that made her walk away. Dumbledore has been planning this, of course. He waits until the next report from Snape proves true, until a second and third corroborate the first. Then he asks Lily, very calmly, to meet him, to verify details only a former friend would know, to help him judge whether this defection is conviction or mere survival. The secure room is somewhere beneath Hogwarts, stone and silence, and layered wards. Lily walks in first. She has a wand, a flask of emergency potion at her belt, a letter from James folded twice in her pocket. It says, "Trust your judgment. Come home." Snape is already there, in shadows that are not quite dramatic enough to be accidental. He looks thinner, older. The mark on his arm is hidden, but the way he holds himself, angled away from her, is a kind of confession. He looks at her. She looks at him. For a moment, the war shrinks to the length of the table between them. Why now? Her voice is steady. After everything. After everyone, he does not say, because the Dark Lord spoke your name with calculation, and I saw the shape of your death. In this world, that night at the Hog's Head has not yet come. So his answer is harder to pin down, even for himself. The Dark Lord is mistaken, he says instead, about the nature of power, about what can be controlled. I prefer to live in a world that survives his education. It is almost wry. Almost. Lily's mouth tightens. You preferred him for years. A muscle jumps in his jaw. I know, everything I have done. I am not asking you to forget it. He stops there, refuses the word that hangs in the air between them. Forgive. They circle old wounds like cursed objects. Hogwarts flashes between them in half-finished sentences. By the lake, you chose them. You chose that word, and you chose James Potter. Each accusation is sharp, but Dumbledore's wards press around them, reminding them why they are here. Lily drags the conversation back to the present. Names, dates, locations. She tests his intel against what the Order already knows, against tiny personal details, the way Mulciber used to gloat, the exact phrase Rosa used for Muggleborns. Snape answers precisely. No grand speeches, just information, laid out like ingredients on a worktable. A moment of understanding passes between them, thin as a thread. He is not lying about this. People may live. Finally, she nods once. I'll work with you, she says, when it's necessary. For them. She does not specify who them is. Her son, her friends, the nameless families who will never know how close they came. But this doesn't erase anything. You don't get to walk back into my life because you've decided you don't like where you ended up. He inclines his head, as if accepting a formal sentence. I did not expect. Welcome. They look at each other, not as childhood almost friends, not as enemies, but as two people bound to the same dangerous choice. Stand against Voldemort, or watch the world burn. It is not reconciliation. It is a fragile, tactical truce, more than any description could contain. Outside the stone room, the war waits for their decision to hold, or shatter, under its weight. James and Snape, from schoolyard enemies to reluctant allies. The air in the safe house is tight and stale. Too many wards on too little space. Too many secrets pressed into the stone. James stands with his back to the fireplace, arms folded, as if he can hold the whole room at bay by posture alone. He has been planning this conversation since the moment Dumbledore's quiet letter arrived, the one that said, in careful ink, that Severus Snape has turned against Voldemort and will be working with the Order. The words looked wrong together, like a curse miscast. Old memories moved behind his eyes. A different room, a different decade. Sunlight on the Hogwarts lake. Laughter that was not kind. Snape dangling upside down from an invisible hook, while half the school watched. The flash of a hex, the white shock of Lily's voice cutting through it. Later, the Whomping Willow thrashing, Sirius's reckless dare. A werewolf where a friend should have been. James dragging Snape back from death and earning, not thanks, but a lifetime of poison in return. He knows everything he needs to know about Severus Snape. Or he thinks he does. The door opens. Snape walks in first, Dumbledore behind him, Sirius already half out of his chair. Wands are not drawn, but they might as well be. The tension is a drawn bow. James looks at Snape. Snape does not quite look back, his gaze skimming past James to the maps on the wall, the parchment marked with raids and disappearances. His robes are travel-stained, his hair damp with rain. He looks less like the sneering boy from the castle corridors, and more like a man who has been walking through a war, with no sleep. You cannot be serious, James says, voice low. Then, with a brief, sharp glance at his friend, and, yes, I know you are serious, shut up. Dumbledore's reply is gentle, but James barely hears it. All he can see is Lily at home, one hand on the curve of her belly, or on the cradle, humming under her breath. Snape in the same room as that image feels like a contamination. He imagines Snape's old obsession rekindled, imagines manipulation wrapped in apologies. His protective instinct is not abstract. It is a list in his head. Lily, the baby, their house in Godric's Hollow, every ward, every secret. They move to the briefing table. Maps, names, circles of red ink. Dumbledore explains Snape's defection, a mission gone too far, Muggle screams in a cellar, Voldemort's casual amusement. A line crossed that even Snape could not step over. James hears it and does not trust it. He has been planning this, he thinks. Either way. For Dumbledore. For Voldemort. For himself. When Dumbledore leaves them to settle terms, the room shrinks, Sirius leans on the table, knuckles white. Snape stands very straight. All right, James says. Here it is. I'll fight beside any weapon that takes Voldemort down. Even you. But understand something. If one choice you make puts Lily or our child in more danger, there won't be a second chance. Snape's mouth twists. I am not here for your approval, Potter. Good, James answers. You won't have it. They look at each other. A moment of understanding passes between them. Not forgiveness, just the shared, exhausted knowledge that the world is burning, and they are both standing too close to the same fire. Days later, the test comes. An order team walks into an ambush that should have killed them. It does not, because Snape sends word first, late at night, through a risky channel only he could use. The safe house fills with the injured, but they are alive, more than any description could contain. James watches Snape across the crowded room, sees the man's hands still shaking from whatever he did to get that message out. He does not thank him, not aloud, but something in his certainty cracks. Just a little. If Snape can change under this pressure, what else in the war's pattern might shift? The answer will arrive with their next mission, and with the first real opportunity for betrayal. The war rewritten. Key battles with Snape on the right side. The house on the edge of the moor is too quiet. No birds, no wind, only the faint ticking of an old clock that does not quite keep time. 3 hours earlier, order safe house. A map of Britain lies open on the table, covered in coloured pins and cramped handwriting. Bones. Pruitt. McKinnon, names that are supposed to be warnings, not epitaphs. Snape stands over it, pale in the lamplight, reciting locations in a flat voice, while Moody scratches notes and Dumbledore only listens. He has been planning this, Dumbledore thinks. Not the betrayal of Voldemort. That choice came jagged and desperate, but the way he remembers everything. Every raid, every whispered threat, every casual mention of a target spoken in front of the quiet, clever Slytherin they all underestimated. The Pruitt brothers are first. In canon, they die like heroes, 7 Death Eaters to kill them. In this war, Snape closes his eyes, traces a finger from Wiltshire to Devon, and says, softly, that the Dark Lord wants a spectacle. Moody looks up sharply. A spectacle can be turned. They walk through the plan, apparition points, ward anchors, where Fabian will insist on standing, because he is stubborn and proud. 2 nights later, the Death Eaters arrive to find not 2 aurors caught off guard, but a ring of silent wards and a dozen wands already raised. Fabian and Gideon still fight like the world is ending, but this time they do not fight alone. Dolohov goes down with his wand hand shattered. Rosier is captured alive. The Pruitts live, coughing, laughing, furious that their last stand has been stolen from them. The victory ripples outward. With Rosier in a secure cell and Dolohov in St. Mungo's under guard, Voldemort's inner circle thins. Snape's next warning, about the Bones family, is less precise. He knows the week, not the day. The Order Station's guards, rotates watch shifts, sends Amelia coded letters she reads with tight lips and a drawn face. The attack still comes, but it is sloppy, rushed, met by prepared auras and reinforced wards. Edgar Bones dies holding the line. His wife and children escape through a back garden portkey that should never have existed. The cost arrives almost immediately. Deprived of clean, surgical strikes, Voldemort turns to indiscriminate terror. Imperious shopkeepers walk into crowded squares with cursed objects. Random Muggle villages wake to the dark mark burning over roofs no one in the magical world has ever mapped. The war phrase. It is no longer a string of targeted assassinations, but a chaos of small, cruel surprises. Snape's role shifts with it. He is no longer just an informant passing names and dates like contraband. In Dumbledore's office, with maps and old books and a pot of tea gone cold, he starts predicting the Dark Lord's experiments. New curses that stitch to bone, potions that cling to the air like fog. He sketches countermeasures in a tight, elegant hand, arguing with McGonagall over ethics and with Moody over tactics. And sometimes, when Lily walks in to deliver a report, he falls abruptly silent. He looks at her. She looks at him. A moment of understanding passes between them, layered with everything they will not say in front of the others. Each battle they divert, each family they save, bends the line of fate a little further away from Godric's Hollow. The Potters move safe houses more often. The Fidelius charm is discussed, not assumed. No one can quite say where the war is heading now. It branches and twists, a living thing, dangerous and uncertain. Survival feels possible, more than any description could contain, but never ever guaranteed. And somewhere in that uncertainty, the next mission is already forming, the next choice that will decide whether this rewritten war holds, or snaps back to the story they all fear. Pattern interrupt. A glimpse of Harry's alternate childhood. The garden is bright and too quiet. Then sound rushes in. A high, breathless laugh. Small feet pounding over uneven ground. The sharp green smell of cut grass hangs in the air, mixed with the faint sweetness of crushed dandelions and the metallic tang of old ward stones humming under the soil. A little boy with messy black hair tears past a rosebush, trainers skidding, one sock half fallen around his ankle. His glasses are slightly crooked. His hands are outstretched, chasing a buzzing golden blur that zips and darts just out of reach. A toy snitch, wings whirring, enchanted to stay low to the ground. It looks like it is laughing at him. Harry. Not so close to the boundary. Lily's voice carries across the garden. Not loud, but edged. The kind of warning a child knows means she is serious. She stands near the kitchen door, apron still on, a smear of flour on her wrist, red hair pinned up and already escaping in wisps around her face. From the doorway behind her, James leans one shoulder against the frame, watching. There is a toy broom in his hand, polished handle, tiny stirrups. He has been planning this all week, arguing with Lily over the exact height limit of the safety charm, adjusting the cushioning runes until even a fall would feel like landing on pillows. He looks at Harry. She looks at him. A moment of understanding passes between them. Today, they will argue less and remember more. Harry skids to a stop, toes just shy of an invisible line where the grass changes. Slightly darker, slightly flatter, as if the world itself knows to hesitate there. The wards are silent to him, but they hum against Lily's skin, a constant reassurance. He wobbles, then turns, chest heaving, hair sticking to his forehead. Sorry, Mum. He calls, the word easy, unremarkable, like he has said it 1,000 times and expects 1,000 more. Lily's warning tone softens, the tension loosening from her shoulders. Just here, love, inside the line. She kneels, arms open. Harry runs back, the toy snitch looping lazily behind him now, obedient to some quiet charm James worked into its brass body. The grass brushes his ankles. A bee drones somewhere near the hydrangeas. When he reaches her, Lily scoops him up with practiced ease, his weight settling against her like he has always belonged there. Because he has. At the doorway, James laughs. Low and warm, told you he'd test the wards before breakfast. There is pride in it, and something like awe. This is his son, alive, loud, entirely himself. Pattern interrupt. Because beyond the glimmering edge of the wards, at the far end of the garden where the light falls differently, a tall figure stands very still. Black robes. Severus Snape. The wind tugs at the hem of his cloak, but he does not move. He looks thinner than memory, or perhaps more contained, as if the years have been spent folding sharp edges inward. His eyes track the boy's every movement with a focus that is more than any description could contain. Longing sits on his face like an old, familiar mask that no longer fits. Regret carves new lines at the corners of his mouth. He does not reach for his wand. He does not step forward. The wards shimmer between him and the garden, between his past and this impossible, ordinary morning. Lily glances up once, as if sensing something. Her gaze brushes the boundary, does not cross it. She tightens her hold on Harry. James shifts his grip on the toy broom, some instinct making him straighten, but he stays in the doorway. They do not wave, they do not speak. They look at each other only in passing, through layers of air and spellwork and history. Snape inclines his head, almost invisible, the gesture meant for no one and everyone. He turns, walks away down a narrow lane lined with hedges and old stones, a shadow receding from a life he will never fully enter, but will never stop guarding. We are not told how Voldemort fell. We are not told what bargains were struck, what letters were sent, what secrets crossed the desks at Gringotts. What blood inheritance rituals were invoked in hidden rooms, or who did not walk back from the last battlefield. We only know this. Harry grew up loved, and Snape lived long enough to see it. The smell of cut grass, the hum of wards, a child's laughter. Then the garden fades, like steam on cold glass, and we are back in the war. Before this morning exists, before anyone can be sure it ever will, the unspoken question hangs over every choice still to come. What had to happen, and who had to bleed, to carve that fragile future out of the world at all? The fall of Voldemort, reimagined, no boy who lived. The battlefield is bright and wrong. Green light hangs in the air longer than it should, smeared across the sky like someone dragged a brush through the killing curses and refused to let them go. Screams echo off the wards, stone fractures. The earth itself looks tired. Late autumn, 1981. A valley on the edge of Wales, once a quiet Muggle village, now a killing ground wrapped in layered charms. Dumbledore walks through the smoke, cloak singed at the hem, wand steady. He has been planning this, but not like this. Never like this. Voldemort has Horcruxes in this world as surely as in the one we know, pieces of soul hidden in objects that do not care who dies around them. Dumbledore does not yet know everything. He suspects something. Too many escapes, too much resilience. But his theory is still a shape in fog, not yet a word he dares to say aloud. So when the Order gathers tonight, they are not expecting a clean, permanent victory. They are hoping for a fracture. The tipping point is not a prophecy. It is arrogance. Voldemort overextends. He brings too many of his inner circle to one place, hungry to break Dumbledore in a single theatrical blow. He has an experimental curse ready, a lattice of blood and bone and stolen runes that will scour the valley and bind every surviving wand to his will. He has been planning this as well, tracing sigils in the air over maps, trusting one man above all to refine the brew that will anchor the spell. Severus Snape. Snape stands in the shadows of a ruined farmhouse, robes stiff with potion residue, eyes on the circle of carved stones where Voldemort is beginning the chant. He looks at the cauldron. He looks at the sky. He remembers a garden that has not yet existed, the sound of a child's laughter he has only ever heard in his own mind. He has been planning this for months. Misdirected ingredient shipments. A sigil line altered by half a degree. A stabilizing rune replaced with one that fractures under sudden magical strain. To Voldemort, these are invisible. To Dumbledore, passed through cautious, coded meetings and double-checked by Alistair Moody, they are the outline of a trap. The coalition is larger than in the world we know. French curse breakers from Gringotts, a Bulgarian strike team, a quiet Japanese ward mistress who says little and sees everything. They walk the perimeter, lay counter-rituals in the soil, anchor escape paths for the wounded. When the first Death Eaters apparate in, the air hums as foreign and British wards collide. Voldemort begins the final phrase. The cauldron flares, then the curse folds in on itself. Light implodes, not explodes, dragged inward like water down a drain. The carved stones crack. Death Eaters are thrown back, masks shattering, arms breaking. For one impossible heartbeat, Voldemort is outlined in white fire, body and soul no longer perfectly aligned. Dumbledore strikes. It is not elegant. It is desperate, layered magic, more than any description could contain. Severing charms, binding chains of light. A silent plea to whatever still listens. Snape's whispered insight, how Tom Riddle fears containment more than death, guides his hand. Voldemort's body tears apart. There is no falling infant, no rebounding curse. Only a scream that rips through every ward and then vanishes, leaving ash, scorched stone, and a dark stain on the air that does not quite disperse. They win, but it feels like surviving a storm, not slaying a monster. There is no boy who lived, no lightning-scarred legend. The wizarding world tells itself a different story. Of Dumbledore's leadership, of international aid, of the nameless potioneer whose sabotage turned the tide. Children grow up hearing that Voldemort fell because many people stood together, not because one baby did the impossible. Death Eaters are hunted, scattered, imprisoned. Some claim their master is gone. Others whisper that he is merely elsewhere. Dumbledore looks at the empty space where the Dark Lord stood and cannot shake the sense of something unfinished. He and Snape look at each other across the ruined valley. A moment of understanding passes between them, sharp and uneasy. This is not over. It has only changed shape. Somewhere, a hidden object pulses once and goes still. Years later, when the wards around a peaceful cottage in Godric's Hollow hum a little too sharply one night, that unfinished question will come back. What, exactly, did they destroy in that valley? And what did they leave behind? Aftermath and amnesty. Snape's place in the post-war order. The chamber is open and full of whispers. Not a secret vault beneath Gringotts this time, but courtroom 10, repurposed. The chains have been removed from the central chair. The cold stone remains. August light filters weakly through a high, charmed window. The war has ended in flashes of green and collapsing masks. Now comes the quieter work, deciding what to do with the people who wore them. He has been planning this, Severus Snape tells himself. Though planning is the wrong word for surviving a war and then walking voluntarily into judgment. Around him, the benches of the Visingamot fill with plum robes, silver fastenings, tired faces. Some look at him with open contempt, some with calculation, a few with something like curiosity, more than any description could contain. Outside, the prophet runs daily tallies, trials, sentences, excuses. In here, they speak of Imperius as if it were a fashion. This one bewitched, that one coerced, another claiming to have woken from a curse the moment the dark mark burned. Others do not appear at all, having slipped into the cracks of the magical world, vanished like smoke. And then there are the handful like him, who step forward with records and witnesses and scars, insisting they broke ranks before the end and tried to make amends. Dumbledore sits as a formal witness rather than chief warlock, a quiet concession to conflict of interest. His beard looks more ash than silver now. When he rises, the room settles. He speaks of missions planned in shadowed rooms, of potions brewed to counter curses Snape once admired, of information carried at personal risk. He does not embellish. He does not soften. He simply lays out dates, names, outcomes, auras not ambushed because a warning came in time, wards strengthened because a former Death Eater explained exactly how the Dark Lord liked to break them. Lily and James sit behind the witness rail. They look as if they would rather be anywhere else. When called, James walks with the stiff, wary gait of a man who remembers school corridors and shouted insults. He confirms that Snape's reports allowed them to relocate safe houses, that a particular tip spared a patrol in Godric's Hollow. Lily follows, voice steady, eyes shuttered. She corroborates 3 missions, no more, no less, and refuses to speculate on motive. He looks at her. She looks at him. A moment of understanding passes between them, brittle and unfinished. Outside this chamber, the story is simpler. Former Death Eater. Dangerous man. Parents write urgent letters to the prophet, asking whether such people will be allowed near Hogwarts. Families of the dead whisper that if he could turn once, he could have turned sooner, and their children might still walk the world. No blood inheritance test, no Gringotts ledger of good deeds will ever balance that column. The deliberation stretches. Restrictions are debated like ingredients in a volatile potion. No work in certain departments. No unsupervised access to restricted artifacts. Monitoring charms. Periodic reviews. In the end, the verdict lands somewhere between condemnation and absolution, conditional amnesty, in exchange for continued service, either to the Ministry's Research Corps or to Hogwarts, under Dumbledore's direct oversight. Freedom, technically. A life, circumscribed. He accepts, of course he does. What else is there? Azkaban? Exile? Wand snapped and buried? He has been planning this too. A future measured in classrooms and essays, in cauldrons and controlled variables, instead of raids and screams. When he steps out of courtroom 10, the corridor feels too bright. Wizards and witches part around him, then close ranks as if he were a stain the stone will eventually absorb. The war, they say, is over. The mark on his arm says otherwise. His own war, for a name not followed by a hissed slur, for purpose beyond penance, has only changed location. At the far end of the hall, a familiar figure waits, half in shadow, half in light, holding a sealed envelope that looks unremarkable and heavy at once. Snape slows, wary. Dumbledore does not move. Should he open that letter now, or walk past and pretend he has not seen it? So do I. They look at each other, and the choice between two futures hangs in the air, sharp and fragile, as something else in the depths of the ministry stirs that no one has accounted for yet. Hogwarts recast. Snape the young professor without a double life. The staff table is bright and loud. Silver dishes steaming, candles drifting, 100 conversations stacking over one another. And at the far end, a young man in plain black robes sits very straight, hands folded, as if waiting for a verdict. September 1981. Hogwarts has reopened barely a week after the last skirmishes of the war. Dumbledore announces him with that same calm gravity he used for casualty lists. Professor Severus Snape, potions. The word hangs in the air. Some students clap because they are supposed to. Some simply stare at the thin man with the shadowed eyes who looks like he has not slept since June. Dumbledore has been planning this. Not on a whim, not out of sentiment. Snape's file is thick, unmatched NEWTs in potions and defense, experimental work even the older masters respect, a list of war assignments that reads like a map of the worst fighting. The headmaster knows the world needs to anchor its former weapons somewhere, or watch them drift back into the dark. A classroom is safer than a cellar. A timetable is safer than a secret. Still, he prefers to keep that weapon where he can see it. A staff appointment is employment and surveillance in one. A salary, a warded set of chambers, a clear chain of authority. Snape knows this. He accepts the post anyway. McGonagall watches him over the rim of her goblet, eyes sharp. She remembers trials, masks, the murmurs about who had taken the mark and who had not. Cautious acceptance is the most she can offer. If Dumbledore vouches for him, she will not openly oppose it, but she will count detentions, listen to rumours, watch how he walks among her lions. Flitwick, by contrast, leans forward, curious. He has read the man's, published notes in obscure journals, footnotes about potion stability and curse resonance that only a handful of scholars could follow. Academic curiosity wins out over unease. What could such a mind do with a well-stocked dungeon and a steady stream of students to train? Others are less generous. Sprout's smile is tight. Vector's nod is cool. One or two younger staff members shift their chairs a fraction farther away, as if the memory of the dark mark might still burn. In the classroom, Snape is strict from the first lesson. Instructions on the board, voice low and precise, sarcasm like a blade kept carefully honed. He deducts points without hesitation. He assigns extra essays that feel like punishments. But the bitterness that will one day curdle into open cruelty has not fully formed. Lily is alive. The Potters are alive. The worst thing he has done has not yet cost him everything. His temper flares when he feels mocked, not when he feels doomed. A whispered joke, a poorly concealed smirk, and his eyes narrow. Cauldrons vanish, homework doubles. Yet when a shy Ravenclaw brews a near-perfect draught of peace, his approval is quiet and real. There is no half-blood prince here, no secret textbook buried under a mattress, no furious marginalia rewriting school recipes out of spite and loneliness. His brilliance surfaces instead in the official curriculum, safer antidotes refined from battlefield improvisations, stabilizing runes chalked on the board, test questions that assume the students can know more than the book. Years pass. The war recedes into bedtime stories, but its children begin to arrive. Sons and daughters of Auras, of former Death Eaters, of the frightened in between. His classroom becomes a crucible, old loyalties and new lives simmering together under green steam. Somewhere in Godric's Hollow, a boy with untidy hair and parents who lived is learning to read, to fly, to ask hard questions about the world that nearly killed them. When that boy's Hogwarts letter finally comes, it will carry him straight into Snape's dungeon, into lessons shaped by choices made long before he was born. They look at each other, that future professor and that future student, across a gap of years neither can see yet. A moment of understanding passes between them before it even exists, written into the timetable, into the way past and future insist on meeting in stone corridors and potion fumes. He has been planning this, Dumbledore thinks, watching Snape stalk between cauldrons. Not just a job, but a stage, and the next act is already on its way up the castle drive. Harry Potter, not the boy who lived, a different childhood. The house is quiet and full of wards. Godric's Hollow, 1985. Not a ruin, not a memorial. A narrow lane, a cottage with climbing roses, and protections layered so thick that visiting auras walk away with a faint ache behind their eyes. Inside, Harry grows up knowing there was a war, the way other children know there are thunderstorms. Loud, frightening, but survivable if the right people are holding your hand. His earliest memories are not cupboards and shouted orders, but the soft thud of books closing, the rustle of robes as Lily moves from kitchen to sitting room. Wand always somewhere, she can reach it in a breath. James jokes about it, calls her my paranoid genius, but he checks the perimeter twice a day, runs his fingers along the doorframe where the anti-apparition line hums. Harry watches, absorbs. In his world, safety is not the absence of danger. It is the presence of preparation. They do not tell him everything. They tell him fragments. A bad wizard. Old families who chose the wrong side. Friends who did not come back. At 5, he knows that his parents are respected. At 7, he understands that people look at them in Diagon Alley a little too long. At 9, he hears the word hero whispered and sees Lily's jaw tighten. James's hand close around hers, a silent refusal to let that word become the air their son breathes. Instead, Harry's air is broom polish and laughter. James starts him with toy brooms in the back garden, then a battered training model that never flies higher than the apple tree, unless James is right there, pacing beneath. James flies like he lives, fast, a little reckless, full of sudden dives and loops that make neighbours peek over fences. Lily stands on the back step, arms folded, issuing rules that sound exasperated and are, in fact, love in another language. No solo flights beyond the wards. No stunts without pads. We survived one war. We are not losing you to a broken neck. Harry learns to negotiate between them, to reach for the rush of speed and the comfort of boundaries. That balance becomes part of him. Inside, Lily builds a different kind of training ground. She clears a low shelf for harmless objects. A feather, a stone, a glass of water, a potted plant. She calls it our laboratory and explains that magic is not just waving and wanting. It is patterns, intent, all shaped by knowledge. At 6, Harry practices focusing on the feather until it trembles. At 8, he can coax the plant to uncurl a new leaf, if he is patient and kind in the way he speaks to it. Kindness is not optional in Lily's lessons. She tells him about Muggleborns who arrived at Hogwarts bewildered and brilliant, about werewolves who are people first, about goblins at Gringotts who remember every slight and every treaty. Power, she says, is the ability to hurt someone, and the decision not to. He listens, legs swinging off the chair, trying to imagine a world where adults chose differently, and his parents did not have to keep their wands near the sink. Without the Dursleys, there is no thin, hungry boy measuring his worth in withheld meals and slammed doors. Harry is hugged without being asked to earn it. When he does accidental magic, no one calls him a freak. Lily takes notes. James cheers. They send a discreet letter to McGonagall asking if this is early, if this is normal. He walks into rooms expecting to be welcome. He looks at adults and assumes they will explain things, eventually, if he keeps asking. But there are gaps. He has not seen what people do when they think no one important is watching. His first brush with cruelty is not a fist. It is a headline about a werewolf employment ban. A hushed conversation about a Death Eater's light sentence because of family influence. At 11, at Hogwarts, that will hit him harder than any cupboard ever could. Systemic injustice will not be a continuation of his life. It will be a violation of everything his home quietly promised. Still, before the train, before the castle, Harry stands between his parents in their warded garden and understands this much. There was a war before him. People died. His surname has enemies attached to it, like burrs. But he is not a symbol, not a scar on a pedestal. He is a boy with a family, a wand waiting, and a future that for once does not arrive already written. He has been planning this, James thinks sometimes, watching his son race the wind and then slow, remembering the rules without being told. Not a destiny, a childhood. And that changes everything. Snape at the periphery, the distant guardian of the Potter child. Fog on the lane, a hedgerow, a low stone wall, the faint glow of a cottage window far ahead. Godric's Hollow, 1981. The war is officially over. The world is pretending to breathe again. Severus Snape stands where the lane bends, cloak drawn tight, boots damp with evening mist. He has been planning this walk for weeks and hating himself for it in the same breath. He told Dumbledore he did not need to see them. Dumbledore had only looked over his half-moon spectacles, then sent a brief letter anyway. A gathering. Small. Order members, no press, no ministry. A chance, the old man had called it. For what? Severus is not sure. Redemption is a word for other people. He arrives late, of course. The cottage is full of light and noise, the low hum of voices, the sharp burst of Sirius's laugh, the quieter cadence of Remus. He waits in the shadow of the doorway until Dumbledore notices, until a hand on his arm steers him in. There is food on the table, empty bottles, a toy broom propped against a chair, and on the rug, wobbling on unsteady legs, is the boy. Harry looks up at the movement of the door, fist still wrapped around a stuffed stag. Dark hair sticks up in every direction. The child blinks, then grins, wide and unguarded, and Severus feels the room tilt, because Lily's eyes are looking out of James Potter's face. He stops. He cannot walk further into the light. He stands there, just inside the threshold, while conversations falter and then resume with studied determination. No one calls him over. No one introduces him. Lily, across the room, has Harry balanced on her hip now, one hand curved protectively around his back. She looks at him. He looks at her. A moment of understanding passes between them, fragile and thin as spun glass. You may stay, that look says. You may exist on the edge of this world, but you do not touch the center of it. It is more than he deserves. It is more than any description could contain. The resentment is there, sour and old. James's smirk, James's wand, James's arm around Lily's shoulders. The child is proof that Severus lost, that his rival grew up, survived, and kept everything that mattered. Yet under that, coiled like a second spine, is guilt. He knows exactly how close he came to helping destroy this room, these walls, that laugh. A different choice, a different night, and there would be no toy broom, no stuffed stag, no boy. He channels it. He has to. He buries himself in wards and counter-curses, in obscure defensive theory, in long evenings in Dumbledore's office arguing about where protections must be strengthened. Safe houses, order caches, the Potter's cottage, most of all. He walks the boundaries with the headmaster, tests the layers, suggests additions, blood and bone and old runic chains that make even Dumbledore pause. No new Dark Lord will touch this child, he thinks. Not while I breathe. Lily and James keep their boundaries. They nod when they must, tolerate his presence at meetings, accept his terse reports on Death Eater remnants. But they do not invite him for dinner. They do not ask him to hold Harry. To the boy, he is a name in overheard conversations, a shadow that arrives after bedtime and leaves before breakfast. Years later, the pattern holds. The world moves on, but Severus still finds his way back to this lane. One night in late autumn, he stands again by the hedgerow, cloak snapping softly in the wind, wand out as he silently probes the air. The wards around the Potter home flare in his senses, layered, bright, intricately tied to Lily's blood and James's magic, to a tiny pulse of power inside. Everything holds. He allows himself one more look at the lit window, where a small shape moves against the curtains, where laughter leaks faintly into the night. Then he turns away, unseen, not knowing that the next threat to this house will not come from outside the wards at all. Pattern interrupt, sorting night without the legend. The hall is full of whispers and candlelight. September 1st, 1991. Hogwarts. The enchanted ceiling shows a high, clear sky, scattered with early stars. Candles float in careful rows. The first years stand in a loose knot before the staff table, shoes squeaking on stone, trying not to stare at the ghosts gliding past. There is no hush when Professor McGonagall unrolls her parchment. No collective intake of breath, waiting for a name that has already become a story. The war ended with treaties and trials, not with a baby in a ruined house. Harry is a Potter, yes, but not a legend. More like a surname people recognize the way they recognize a famous Quidditch player or a well-known aura. He shifts his grip on the edge of his robe, palms slightly damp. He has been planning this walk up the aisle for weeks, imagining every stumble, every possible way to look ridiculous. He is not thinking, "I defeated Voldemort." He is thinking, "Dad once turned McGonagall's desk into a lion that sang the school song, and Mum rewrote half Slughorn's lesson plans with suggested improvements. How do you walk into their school and not fall short?" McGonagall calls names, a girl with trembling hands, a boy who nearly trips over the stool, laughter, soft and brief. The world feels very narrow, reduced to stone, candle wax, and the list in her hands. At the staff table, Snape watches. He notes the boy's posture first, straight, but not rigid. The way Harry stands half a step behind Hermione Granger, as if by quiet agreement he will follow her lead through this new magical world. The way his eyes flick, again and again, toward the side of the hall where the guests' gallery has been opened for the evening. Lily sits there, James beside her, fidgeting with his glasses, already whispering a running commentary that makes Sirius snort with badly concealed laughter. They look down, leaning forward, as McGonagall reaches the peas. A moment of understanding passes between them. Whatever house the hat chooses, they will pretend to be surprised. Harry does not look up at the staff table. Snape notices that too. The familiar green eyes skim past him, then away, as if some quiet family rule has been laid down. Do not bother Professor Snape on duty. Or perhaps Harry simply does not know what to make of the man who arrived at Godric's Hollow years ago, with a letter and a lifetime of guilt. Potter, Harry. The name ripples through the hall. Curious glances. A few nudges. That's them, right? The aura and the charms researcher. The ones from the trials. But no one cranes their neck, as if a myth has stood up. Harry walks to the stool. One foot, then the other. He feels the weight of his parents' eyes, of stories told at the kitchen table about pranks and patrols and nights in this very hall when they thought the war might swallow everything. The hat settles over his hair, sliding down past his glasses. Ah, the voice is dry, amused, echoing in his head. Another Potter, but not quite the same pattern. Harry freezes. You know my parents? Know them? The hat chuckles. I have listened to every reckless thought they ever had about house loyalty in late-night corridors. You are different. Less anger, more caution. A steady home will do that. He thinks of Lily's careful notes, of James's patient explanations about the Wizengamot, of evenings where they look at each other across the table, weighing how much of the old war to share. He thinks of Hermione on the train, already sorting facts into neat piles. Courage, certainly, the hat muses. Curiosity too, and a stubborn loyalty that will not bend easily. No prophecy coils around you, no scar linking you to that particular Dark Lord. Your path is open. Open how? He asks, pulse loud in his ears. That, the hat says, is the interesting part. It pauses, considering, drawing out the moment until the hall seems to lean forward as one. Then it takes a breath, and chooses. We will come back to that choice. House and heritage. How Harry's sorting changes the web. The hall is still holding its breath. Gryffindor, the hat says at last. The shout cracks across the great hall like a spell. Red and gold explode into motion. James is on his feet before he seems to decide to stand, laughing, clapping so hard his palms sting. Lily's smile is smaller but brighter, a contained sun behind her eyes. Of course, it is Gryffindor. He has been planning this in ways he doesn't have words for. Growing up in a house where courage is not a story but the thing that got his parents and their friends through nights when Voldemort walked the world. Every bedtime tale has a lion in it. Every framed photograph on the wall is a dare. This is who we were. Who will you be? Still, for a heartbeat under the hat's brim, Ravenclaw called to him, the quiet rooms. The stacks of books Lily keeps at home. The way she and Hermione talk when they visit. Low and fast and full of runes and theory and old strange magic. A house where curiosity is not a distraction from bravery, but another form of it. The hat knows everything he has read, every letter he has watched his mother write to Bathsheba babbling about ward schemes, and to Gringotts about obscure clauses in Potter and Evans' family law. But in the end, the Scarlet boy who never had to survive a cupboard still reaches first for risk and loyalty. Gryffindor wins by a margin so thin he will not understand it for years. At the staff table, Snape's jaw tightens. Gryffindor means red and gold robes. James's laugh echoing in every corridor, a house table that once turned its back on him. It means old instincts flaring. Potter equals trouble, equals arrogance, equals everything he swore he had outgrown. A Slytherin Harry would have been an exercise in theory. A Ravenclaw Harry, an academic puzzle. This Gryffindor Harry, lifting his head, looks so much like James that the past is not theory at all. He looks at her. She looks at him. Across the hall, Lily's fingers close around James's wrist under the table. Do not flinch, that grip says. Do not let him see you afraid for him. Later, in their kitchen, they talk in low voices while Harry pretends to do homework. Pride sits between them, loud as a third chair. So does worry. Their son will walk past the children of men James stunned on battlefields. Of men Lily saw in Death Eater masks. When Snape brought her reports Dumbledore did not always want to hear. How much of that war do they tell him now that he shares a house with their younger echoes? On the train, things had already begun to bend away from canon. Harry still met Ron, yes, but as the famous son of living parents, not the lonely boy with a trunk full of hand-me-down fear. There was room at that compartment table for Neville, shy but determined, and for a Muggle-born girl whose parents had met Lily at the bank and trusted this magical world a little more because of her. No Malfoy air this time. Draco had looked in, seen James Potter's son, and walked on, uncertain how to live in a world where his father's side lost so publicly. And Snape at Hogwarts complicates everything. No prophecy coils around this boy. No Dark Lord has marked him as equal. The question is not how Harry will defeat Voldemort, but who Harry is allowed to become when survival is no longer his defining task. Yet every lesson, every point awarded or taken, is coloured by the fact that the man at the front of the room once chose Lily over darkness, and still has to look, every day, at the living proof that James Potter also survived. They look at each other more often than either of them admits. A moment of understanding passes between them in odd, sharp flashes, over a well-brewed potion, over a remark about shield charms James used in the war. This house choice, this red and gold banner, forces both of them to live in that narrow space between heritage and possibility. And the story of what Snape did, and did not, betray is not finished yet. Snape the teacher, not the tormentor, classroom dynamics rewritten. The classroom is cool and dim, all stone and shadow and bottled light. Steam curls from cauldrons already set out, silver and black against the workbenches. First-year Gryffindors and Slytherins file in, voices low, eyes wide. Harry walks in last with Hermione at his side, that familiar weight of expectation sitting between his shoulders. He has been planning this without quite admitting it to himself, replaying his parents' stories of the war, of the spy who changed sides, of the boy from Spinner's End who once walked the lake shore with Lily Evans. Now that man stands at the front, dark robes still, expression unreadable. Snape calls the register. When he reaches Potter, there is the smallest pause, like a breath caught on glass. No dramatic sneer, no public challenge, just a measuring look, the same one he gives Granger, Malfoy, Longbottom. Yet Harry feels it land differently. He knows this is the man who sat at their kitchen table, who argued with James about defensive wards, who sent them that last urgent letter before a raid. The lecture begins. No speech about dunderheads. Instead, a quiet, cutting description of potions as controlled transformation, as the place where precision becomes power. He talks about the war once, almost idly, how one correctly brewed blood-replenishing draught could save 3 lives on a battlefield. Hermione's quill flies. Harry just listens. Snape starts with questions, definitions, counteragents, brewing temperatures. When Harry answers, Snape does not praise him, but he also does not humiliate him. A faint narrowing of the eyes, a slight incline of the head. When Harry adjusts the flame under his cauldron unprompted, correcting for the dungeon's chill, Snape walks past, looks down, and says, very softly, acceptable. Do not become complacent. It sounds like a warning. It feels like something close to pride. He is stricter with Harry than with most. Points vanish for inattention, for sloppy knife work, for a whispered comment to Ron. But the strictness has edges Harry can map. It is not the wild, irrational cruelty he half feared. If anything, it resembles the way James corrects his shield work in the garden, sharp, unyielding, rooted in the assumption that Harry can do better. House colours complicate everything. Red and gold on Harry's tie draw Snape's gaze the way a scar once did in another world. Old grievances with James, with Sirius, with the Marauder's laughter, pull at his mouth. Yet when Harry's potion comes out textbook perfect, and a Slytherin's turns a worrying shade of brown, it is the Slytherin who gets the public rebuke. Gryffindor loses points, yes, but Slytherin does too. The room notices. In corridors, the pattern continues. A muttered hex from a seventh-year skims toward Harry's back. It dissolves mid-air, with a sound like tearing parchment. Harry turns. Snape is at the end of the hall, wand still half raised, already walking away. Another evening, Harry and Hermione linger near a staircase that should move, but does not. Snape appears out of nowhere. Voice low. The third-floor corridor is closed for a reason. Some doors, Lord Potter, are locked because something behind them is trying to get out. No threat, just information, given in the empty space between classes. Harry looks at him. He looks at Harry. A moment of understanding passes between them and then breaks. Snape's gaze flicks to Hermione, to the ring on her hand that Gringotts recognized, to the quiet way she stands slightly in front of Harry without seeming to. He has been planning this too, Harry realizes. Not the lesson, but the distance, the careful calibration of what he will and will not show. Is Snape an ally, an antagonist, or something stranger? A man bound by old loyalties and new oaths, who intercepts curses and offers warnings but refuses to call any of it care? Harry does not know. Hermione does not either. They look at each other as they leave the dungeon, the air still sharp with the scent of crushed asphodel, and the question follows them up the stairs like another kind of ghost. Lily between two worlds, mother, order veteran, and Snape's anchor. The classroom is quiet and bright and full of eyes. Charms, third period. A guest lecturer stands at the front. Lily Potter adjusts the stack of parchment on the desk, the movement small, precise, practiced. She has been planning this visit for weeks, negotiating schedules with McGonagall, warding the cottage for a day without her, writing a careful letter to Harry that only said, "Looking forward to seeing your school," and nothing about the man whose dungeon she will walk past. The world has taught her to leave some things between the lines. Harry watches his mother demonstrate a layering charm on a set of floating glass spheres. Her wand flickers, economical, beautiful, 3 spheres, 6 colours, 12 interlocking protections. Flitwick looks delighted, almost boyish, as he scribbles notes. Around them, students whisper. It is one thing to know your mother fought in the war, another to see her make the air itself bend. After class, Lily walks the corridor alone. Down one flight, left, the stones cool and damp, the light thinning. She knows this path. She had walked it as a girl, furious, heartbroken, determined never to come back. She walks it now as an order veteran, with a wedding ring and a son in Gryffindor, following a different kind of duty. Snape is waiting in his office, standing rather than sitting, as if this were a summons instead of a visit. He looks at her. She looks at him. A moment of understanding passes between them, and then breaks apart on the sharp edges of everything they remember. Their conversations are never easy. They talk about Wolfsbane dosages, about the updated shield sequences she used in the last skirmish before Voldemort fell, about which students are pushing too far into cursed theory. Underneath, other words move. The alley where he turned on his fellow Death Eaters. The night he walked into Dumbledore's office and did not walk back out again the same man. Years of missions, coded messages, near misses. Years of him standing between her family and the dark he once chose. She does not pretend his past is anything but what it was. When James's distrust spikes, after Harry comes home with a story about a cutting remark in potions, or a detention that felt more like a trial, Lily sits at the kitchen table with her husband and lays it out again. Yes, Severus did terrible things. Yes, he wore that mark freely, but he also gave us positions, names, brewing schedules, enough to turn ambushes into rescues. He intercepted the curse meant for you in Cardiff. He has been planning this penance for longer than you know. With Harry it is different, simpler and harder. He asks direct questions. Did you love him? Did he love you? Was he a good man? She refuses to smooth the story. I loved my friend, she says. I did not love the choices he made. The man he is now is trying. That matters. It does not erase anything. Inside, she carries a quieter grief. Part of her will always mourn the boy in the second-hand robes who talked about arithmancy with bright, hungry eyes, who sent her a carefully inked note about a new charm and signed it as if the name itself were a shield. That boy chose the dark arts in a different world over her. The man before her now has bled to pull himself back across that line. Both truths live in her, side by side, so she makes herself a promise as she leaves Hogwarts that evening, Harry's laughter echoing somewhere above, Snape's door closing softly behind her. Her son will not grow up believing in simple binaries of hero and villain, not when his godfather has a temper, his father holds grudges, his headmaster keeps too many secrets, and the man in the dungeons has saved their lives more than any description could contain. The only question is what Harry will do when he finally learns all of it at once, and who will be standing beside him when that moment comes. James's shadow, pride, jealousy, and co-parenting a war's legacy. The stands are roaring, red and gold banners, the sharp smell of cold air and broom polish, the blur of a tiny figure on a nimbus. James grips the rails so hard his knuckles ache. Somewhere below, in the staff stand, Severus Snape's black silhouette barely moves. Harry dives. The crowd surges to its feet. James shouts with them, voice cracking, pride hitting like a physical spell. His son flies the way he once did. Reckless, precise, alive. And all the while, he knows there is a man in the dungeons who will mark Harry's potions essay tonight, who will write comments in a tight, controlled hand Harry will read by wandlight. He has been planning this visit for weeks, trading shifts with auras, pretending it is only about Quidditch. It is not. It is about letters. Harry's excited scrawl. Snape is strict, Dad, but he's fair when you do the work. It is about the quieter lines in Lily's tidy script. Severus has been pushing Harry in theory. It's good for him. James folds each letter, smooths the creases, feels something twist. Because he remembers Lily's letters once upon a time, full of arguments about runes and obscure potions, names of authors James never bothered to remember. He remembers the way she and Snape could talk for an hour about the structure of a spell. He had been the one in the air, the one with the joke, the grin. Snape had been the one who spoke her language. Now that same man is shaping Harry's magical education in rooms James will never see, with questions James does not even know to ask. It feels, some nights, like there is a shadow version of fatherhood running alongside his own. Quiet, precise, impossible to duel. The argument with Lily starts small. A remark at the kitchen table, Harry's latest mark in potions. An O, with a terse note, shows promise when focused. James snorts. Shows promise, he says, as if Harry needs his approval. Lily looks up, eyes cool. She looks at him. He looks at her. You think this is about approval? She asks. He is teaching our son. He is keeping score, James fires back. He has been keeping score since we were 16. You don't think he knows exactly how to twist things? A cutting comment here. A bit of praise there. Emotional manipulation is a subject he'd get outstanding in Cart. Lily's jaw tightens. He has earned a measure of trust, she says, each word measured. Years of work. Years of risking his life. You can't keep freezing him in 1 year of our lives because it suits your pride. It's not my pride, James lies, too quickly. It's Harry. If Snape wants revenge, he doesn't need curses. He just needs to make Harry feel small. Silence. The clock ticks. A moment of understanding passes between them. Then phrase. Lily stands, walks away before they say something they cannot repair. The revision comes later, in a corridor of Hogwarts stone. James is there on order business, when a minor crisis hits, an enchanted cabinet misfires, shards of glass and wild magic, students coughing in a cloud of glittering dust. James moves on instinct, wand out, but Snape is faster. Shielding charm, counter curse, a hand on a terrified Hufflepuff's shoulder that is brisk but steady. In the staff room afterwards, James lingers by the door. McGonagall is worrying over Harry's latest stunt on a broom. Someone suggests Quidditch is a distraction. Snape's voice cuts through, dry as ever. Potter's recklessness is infuriating, he says, but his grasp of theory is unusual. With proper guidance, he could surpass most of his year within 2 terms. It would be foolish to waste that. James watches him. No audience, no performance, just a man defending Harry's potential, because it is there, and he cannot deny it. Later, over fire whiskey in Grimmauld Place, Sirius grumbles about the bat. James stares into his glass, then says, half joking, half surrender, I still don't like him. But I can't deny he's on our side. Sirius snorts. World's gone mad. So do I, James says quietly, and does not explain what, exactly, he now knows. They look at each other. Somewhere far away, in a dungeon office, a red quill moves over Harry's latest essay, sketching a future neither man can fully see yet, but one that is already more than any description could contain. Hook, the second rise of Voldemort in a world without the scar. The night is very quiet when the first sign appears. Not a dark mark over a burning house, not a mass breakout from Azkaban. Just a report on Snape's desk. Thin parchment, ordinary ink, and Aura's neat hand describing something that should not exist anymore. A family in Dorset, blood wards ruptured from the outside. No survivors, no dark mark, but a residue in the air that the investigating cursebreaker could not classify, except to write, reluctantly, in the margin, feels like him. By then, it has been more than a decade. The world has grown used to the idea that Voldemort is gone. Children walk through Diagon Alley without looking over their shoulders. Gringotts has relaxed its emergency protocols. The Wizengamot argues about trade tariffs and broom regulations instead of counterinsurgency. Even the old families who once whispered in dark drawing rooms now complain, publicly, about ministry paperwork. But the Horcruxes still exist. Dumbledore never found them all. He has been planning this search for years, moving quietly, following faint trails, a ruined shack by the sea, a cursed ring in a forgotten shack, a cup that might be in a bank vault they still cannot breach. Each success only proves the larger, colder truth, that Voldemort never meant to die the first time, that his fall was, at best, a partial defeat. Most witches and wizards do not know this. They do not want to know. The story of the war ends, for them, with a jewel in a ruined manor and a body that never turned up, explained away as overkill from a final spell. There is no boy who lived to keep the fear alive. No scar, no whispered legend in every classroom. Harry Potter is simply a talented student with living parents, a quick wand, and an inconvenient habit of asking why. There are no prophetic dreams waking him in the night, no sudden stabbing pain in his forehead when dark magic moves. The world has lost its unwilling alarm system and does not yet realize what that means. The early signs come scattered. A cursed artifact goes missing from a ministry evidence room. A minor pure bloodhouse, long resentful of post-war reforms that cut into their privileges, quietly withdraws its heirs from Hogwarts and hires private tutors instead. There is a report, half dismissed, of a charismatic speaker holding salons in old manor libraries, talking about purity and power, and how the ministry has forgotten who built this world. Snape reads every report. He has been planning this vigilance since the day he walked into Dumbledore's office and did not die. His experience with Voldemort's magic, the way it twists the air, the way it clings to stone, is something no textbook can teach. His old contacts, the ones who never quite believed his defection, still send him letters when something frightens them more than they hate him. He looks at one such letter now. No signature, just a location, a date, and 3 words: he is gathering. He walks to his shelves, pulls down old files, cross-references dates, locations, surnames. Dorset, the missing artifact, the withdrawn heirs. Lines begin to connect in his mind, slow at first, then with terrible speed, forming a pattern only someone who once served the Dark Lord could see. In the dungeon office, the candles burn low. The castle above sleeps. Snape sits alone at his desk, fingers resting on the final report, and understands. The war he thought he had ended to save one family has only been sleeping. A moment of understanding passes between past and present, between the man he was and the man he has tried to become. Voldemort is coming back, and this time there is no scar to warn them. No Horcrux in Harry, how the final conflict's rules change. The silence in Snape's office feels heavier after that realization, as if the very air has thickened around the words, there is no scar to warn them. In the canonical timeline, that scar is not just a wound, it is a shared corridor. A crack in reality where 2 minds bleed into each other. Through it, Harry sees snakes in graveyards and old men dying. Through it, Voldemort tastes Harry's grief and anger, and uses them like levers. The accidental occlumency that follows, the clumsy lessons with Snape, the way pain in the scar becomes a crude early warning system and a trap at the same time. All of that rests on one night in Godric's Hollow. Here, that night never happens. Voldemort never walks up the garden path. No killing curse rebounds. No fragment of soul, torn and panicked, goes hunting for the nearest living anchor and finds a crying child in a cot. There is no Horcrux in Harry. No magical back door. His mind is only his. It means his childhood is quieter on the inside. No intrusive visions. No dreams that are not his. No sudden lances of pain when a Dark Lord is pleased or furious. When he wakes sweating from nightmares in this world, they belong to him. Memories of whispered arguments downstairs, of his parents coming back late from order meetings, of Lily's eyes tight with worry. Not snakes, not graveyards. Strategically, that matters. Voldemort cannot pour rage into Harry's head to drive him to the Department of Mysteries. He cannot use the boy as a Trojan horse to lure Dumbledore away, cannot slip emotions through a scar and wait for the order to follow. The most vulnerable point in the castle's defences, a teenager's unshielded mind, simply does not exist. Harry, for his part, does not have to learn occlumency as a desperate patch over a failing dam. He has been planning this education with his parents and Hermione instead, building discipline from the ground up, meditation, structured memory, warded journals. He looks at her. She looks at him. When they practice, it is not about surviving a possession. It is about becoming the kind of magical adults who do not leave doors open by accident. But the advantages cut both ways. Without the scar, there is no accidental window into Voldemort's movements. No sudden vision of a snake attacking Arthur Weasley. No glimpse of a graveyard ritual that can be decoded after the fact. The enemy becomes opaque again, a shadow behind layers of wards and loyalists. The Order loses its most direct, if dangerous, source of intelligence. So the burden shifts. Snape's reports, Dumbledore's pattern reading, Lily's arithmancy, James's fieldwork, these become the war's nervous system. They look at each other across kitchen tables and map-strewn desks, knowing there will be no scream from upstairs to tell them when Voldemort is pleased or in pain. A moment of understanding passes between them. If they misread the signs, it will not be a boy who pays the first price. In this version of the war, Harry is not the censor, not the cursed compass. He is a strategist in training, not a living alarm. The adults have to walk further into danger themselves, to spy, to sacrifice, to stand in the places canon once reserved for a child. And as Voldemort's return gathers speed, the question becomes unavoidable. Without that scar, who will be close enough to see him clearly and survive long enough to tell the others? Pattern interrupt. A council of 4. Snape, Dumbledore, Lily, James. The room is small and bright and utterly silent. Stone walls, no windows. A single oak table scarred by spellfire. Around it, 4 chairs, 4 wands, 4 histories that do not quite fit together. Hogwarts, late autumn. Deep beneath the hospital wing, behind 3 sets of wards keyed to Phoenix Song and Potter Blood. On the table, a map of Britain layered with ink and magic. Tiny silver figures move along roads and alleys, cloaked, masked, shifting. Floating notes hang in the air, parchment rectangles that rotate slowly, each bearing a name, a date, a question mark. Suspected Death Eater activity. Raids. Disappearances. Dumbledore does not stand at the head. He sits with the others, fingers folded, blue eyes watching rather than directing. He has been planning this for years, yet tonight he waits. Snape leans over the map, black eyes tracking one small knot of figures coalescing near Derbyshire. His voice is low, precise. This cell answers to Dolohov now. The pattern of attacks, the way they test wards and retreat. It is not Lestrange. Voldemort is rebuilding through his tacticians, not his fanatics. He taps one floating note with a long, ink-stained finger. If we press here, he says, he will faint. If we press here, he shifts to the coast, he will come himself. James snorts, but it is not quite contempt. More like impatience wrapped around fear. And you know that how, Snape? Because you used to stand next to him when he drew the little arrows? His aura training shows in the way he looks at the map, in the way his hand keeps drifting to his wand, in the way he keeps half-turning as if to put his back to the door. Snape does not rise to it. I know because he hates waste, he says, because he will not risk his best until he has bled us of ours. He looks at Dumbledore, not at James. You asked for my analysis. There it is. Lily's chair is pulled closer to the map than anyone else's. Her hair is tied back. Ink smudges her wrist where she has been sketching runic arrays on a separate sheet. She has been planning this too, in her own way, counting protections instead of casualties, thinking in circles of light instead of lines of attack. These villages, she says quietly, tapping 3 points, share the same ley convergence. If he is nesting Horcruxes, if your theory is right, Albus, he will want anchors on old crossings. But the protections we can weave there will be stronger as well. Dumbledore inclines his head, almost deferential. I am increasingly certain of the Horcruxes, he says, but I will not dictate how we hunt them. Not this time. That is the first rule of this council. No prophecy on the table. No scar to consult. No child singled out to walk into darkness alone. Harry is upstairs in Gryffindor Tower, complaining about Transfiguration homework, not being groomed as a weapon. James means to keep it that way. He has been planning this in his own stubborn fashion, checking every ward on Godric's Hollow, every contingency plan, every emergency portkey. Harry stays out of it, he says now, jaw tight. Whatever we do, whatever you do, he stays a boy. Snape's reply is immediate, almost harsh. He will be a target whether he fights or not. The mark on my arm may be gone, but the memory of how the Dark Lord thinks is not. The Potters humiliated him. You humiliated him. He will come. Lily looks at James. She looks at Snape. They look at each other across 10 years of school corridors and slights and apologies that never quite happened. A moment of understanding passes between them, thin but real. The truth is cruel, but necessary. We tell Harry some of it, she says. Not everything. Not yet. Enough that he does not walk blind if the war finds him. Dumbledore lets the argument hang in the air like another floating note. Then he speaks, quietly. Second rule, no single point of failure. We hunt Horcruxes together. Sirius in the field, Remus with the texts, Severus for patterns and potions, Lily for protections, James for tactics. Myself where age and reputation still open doors. And Harry? James asks. Dumbledore's gaze moves to the ceiling, as if he can see the boy through stone. Harry will inherit the world we make here, he says. Whether it is a battlefield or a home, silence settles. The map glows faintly. Outside, the castle shifts in its sleep. No one moves to end the meeting, but something has already been decided. Not in any vote, not in any formal vow, but in the way their eyes meet and do not look away. Whatever lines they draw tonight, between truth and protection, between offense and defense, between using a child and shielding him, will shape not just this war, but the next generation's right to never fight one at all. They look at each other. The Council of Four. In that charged, fragile quiet is more than any description could contain. Harry the student soldier, training without destiny. The castle is quieter and louder at the same time. By Harry's 4th year, Hogwarts feels like a fortress pretending to be a school. Extra wards hum faintly in the stone. Suits of armor stand in new positions. The staff table looks different at meals. Conversations fold in on themselves when students walk past. McGonagall's mouth is thinner. Flitwick's eyes flick more often to the doors. Harry notices, because he has been planning this, in his own way. Not a grand scheme, just a habit of watching. Counting auras at Hogsmeade weekends. Tracking which corridors Filch now patrols twice. Reading every letter from home twice. Once for the words, and once for what his parents do not say. At first, Lily's letters are full of ordinary things, new charms research, a neighbour's baby, Sirius dropping in, and nearly setting the shed on fire. Then the tone shifts. Fewer anecdotes. More questions about how safe he feels, which professors he trusts, whether anyone has been asking unusual questions about his family. James's letters grow shorter, edged with a professional briskness Harry recognizes from the way his father holds himself when he visits the ministry. Nothing you need to worry about yet, Prongslet, James writes once. Harry underlines the word yet until the parchment nearly tears. Security drills become practice duels in defense. Lupin smiles gently, but his lesson plans harden. Shield chains. Disarming in close quarters. How to move in a group without tripping over each other's spells. After class, Harry lingers. Lupin looks at him. He looks at Lupin. A moment of understanding passes between them. The next week, Harry has a standing appointment on Wednesday evenings. Holidays at Godric's Hollow change too. The cozy sitting room becomes an informal training hall. James clears the furniture with a flick, lays down dueling lines in chalk. They walk the patterns until Harry can cast, twist, and roll without thinking. James presses him harder than any professor, then claps his shoulder. Pride and worry mixed in equal measure. Even in potions, the war seeps in. Snape never speaks of it directly. He adjusts Harry's grip on a knife, not for neatness, but for speed. He asks, in that low, precise voice, what Harry would do if a partner dropped a cauldron mid-battle, if a corridor filled with choking fumes, if an ally's wand arm was burned. Tactical thinking, smuggled inside ingredient lists and reaction times. Hermione notices. She looks at Harry. He looks at her. They look at each other. They both know this is more than a class. No one tells Harry about a prophecy. There is only a different kind of sentence you may have to fight, because this is your world too, and you are capable of helping to save it. Dumbledore says it once, quietly, in his office. Lily repeats it, fiercer. James just nods, as if the words have always been true. Harry resents it. Of course he does. He is 15, then 16, and the adults trust him with fragments, patrol routes, names of vanished witches. The fact that Gringotts has tightened its security on certain vaults, but not with everything. He lies awake sometimes, staring at the canopy, afraid that his parents' generation will fail to finish what they started, that he will inherit not peace, but an unfinished war. Yet fear sits beside something else, a stubborn, quiet pride that they believe he can stand in the line with them. So when the next letter arrives, thicker, bearing the order's seal as well as his parents' handwriting, Harry does not hesitate. He walks to the window, looks out over the grounds, and chooses. Not as the boy who lived, there is no legend to hide behind, but as Harry Potter, son of Lily and James, student of Severus Snape and Albus Dumbledore, stepping forward into a fight he was never destined for, only asked to join. And he says, yes. Snape's second war, from traitor to architect of resistance. The classroom is dark and full of echoes, not the dungeons. A repurposed ballroom in Grimmauld Place, every mirror shrouded, every chandelier wrapped in wards that hum when a curse passes too close. Months after Harry's quiet yes at the window, this is where the war comes to be rehearsed, over and over, until muscle and magic remember on their own. Severus stands at the far end, black robes still, wand raised. He watches hex light stutter against his shields, counts the beats between each spell, notes who flinches, who hesitates, who thinks to move instead of merely block. He has been planning this since the first rumours of Voldemort's return reached the Order, because he knows exactly what he cannot be this time. He cannot be their double agent. Voldemort does not forgive. The defector who walked away before the prophecy, who took knowledge of inner circles and fled to Dumbledore, is not a man the Dark Lord would ever welcome back. He is a symbol, a story told in whispers about what happens to traitors. If Severus set foot in a Death Eater gathering now, he would not be tested. He would be killed, quickly and publicly, his death a lesson carved into the floor. So Dumbledore does not ask it of him. The old pattern, Snape walking a knife's edge between two masters, simply cannot exist in this world. Instead, the Order turns him sideways to the battlefield. Not a spy, an architect. In meetings at Hogwarts, in cramped rooms above Diagon Alley shops, in the kitchen at Grimmauld, where tea goes cold beside parchment, Severus sketches the shapes of dark rituals from fragments of rumour. He predicts which families will be targeted for blood, which full moon crossroads will be seeded with traps, which forgotten laws Voldemort's followers will twist for cover. He has been planning this too, counter-rituals, counter-curses, wards layered like scales. He becomes the Order's primary scholar of the dark arts, not as a seduction, but as a map of enemy territory. He writes new shielding sequences for auras who grew up on simpler dueling forms. He designs curse-breaking drills that make even Mad-Eye Moody raise an eyebrow. And when Harry and Hermione bring him obscure references from Peverell grimoires, he looks at her. She looks at him. A moment of understanding passes between them, theory and experience finally aligned. In the ballroom, his role is harsher. Harry, Hermione, Neville, a half-dozen others, they stand in a ragged line, wands up, faces set. The first volley of stinging hexes comes without warning. The second is nastier. By the fifth, someone is on the floor, gasping. "On your feet," Severus says, voice like a snapped wand. Death Eaters will not pause because your pride is bruised. Afterward, they complain. Hermione mutters about unnecessary cruelty. Ron, red-faced, swears the man enjoys it. Even Harry, who knows more than he says, feels the bitterness rise when a hex slams into his ribs. But when the first real ambush hits them outside a burned-out village in Yorkshire, when curses fall in sheets and the air tastes of iron and old stone, their bodies move the way the ballroom taught them. Shields snap up at the right angle. Feet slide, pivot, never rooted. No one freezes at the sound of someone screaming. Later, shaking and alive, Harry realizes this is why Severus never softened the blows. The training was a letter written in bruises, meant to be read in this moment. This time, Severus's stake is not a dead girl's memory. Lily lives. James lives. The Marauder's children and their friends stand under his instruction, their futures not yet stolen. He is not trying to rewrite One October Night. He is trying to ensure there is no second generation, marked by a curse and a nursery rhyme. He walks the corridor outside the ballroom after another session, listening to tired laughter drift through the door. Once, at 16, he imagined himself as a creator of new curses, feared in every duel. Now he has become something else entirely, a guardian of children, a builder of defenses, a man whose loyalty no one in this house thinks to question. They look at each other when he enters, the students, the fighters, the almost grown, and in their eyes he sees something more than any description could contain. Trust, and the quiet, terrible knowledge that the real war is still coming. Climactic convergence, a different final battle. The hall is full of whispers and wandlight, not a chamber this time, but a castle awake for war. Hogwarts. Not under siege by children and teachers alone, but by everyone the magical world has left. Aurors in worn dragonhide, old order veterans with silver in their hair, seventh years standing in tight ranks beside them, faces pale but set. The portraits have gone quiet. The staircases hold still, as if the castle itself is holding its breath. He has been planning this, Dumbledore thinks, not just for months but for decades. Every ward adjusted, every secret passage mapped, every letter sent to allies who once swore they were done fighting. Beside him, Snape stands in black that is practical instead of theatrical, sleeves rolled to the forearms, eyes moving constantly, counting positions, calculating arcs of spellfire. The plan is simple and brutal. Draw Voldemort to ground he believes he understands. Offer him what he cannot resist, a public humiliation of the Order, the Potters, the boy who grew up under their protection instead of his shadow. Then cut him away from his followers and finish what began the night Snape walked into Dumbledore's office and refused to walk back out again. In the room of requirement, repurposed now as a tactical hub, a moving model of the grounds glows on a table. Tiny red sparks for Death Eaters, blue for Order cells, green for the wards Snape has rescripted. Old Slytherin bypasses turned into traps. Lily and James stand over it with mad eye, their flanks marked clearly. Lily with the younger fighters around the greenhouses, James leading broom units over the lake. Harry's marker is not alone at the centre. It is one of several gold lights in the courtyard. Harry, Hermione, a knot of experienced duelists, a St. Mungo's healer team, Kingsley with his calm voice and terrible aim. He knows he is important. He also knows, because they have told him plainly, that he is not the whole plan. The Horcruxes are nearly gone. The ring destroyed in a quiet, terrible summer. The diary taken in a raid on a Gringotts vault. The cup and the locket torn from hiding by adult missions that did not make the profit. Voldemort comes tonight less than immortal, but still more than any description could contain. Snape's moment arrives faster than he expects. A flare on the model. A tremor in the wards. Voldemort begins a ritual in the Forbidden Forest, drawing on the old magic of the grounds to compensate for his fractured soul. A weaving Snape remembers from whispered Death Eater meetings and half-burned scrolls. He walks out under the dark trees with Dumbledore at his side, then breaks away at the last instant, wand already moving in a pattern no Hogwarts dueling book has ever taught. He looks at her. She looks at him. Lily, across the field, sees what he is doing and shifts her line to cover him without a word. Snape unpicks the ritual midcast, not with raw power, but with the precise, vicious understanding of a man who once sat at Voldemort's right hand and then spent years teaching children how to survive curses he never named. The backlash staggers Voldemort, tears screams from the Death Eaters bound to him, and for one clear second the war tilts. Harry steps into that opening with others at his side. Hermione's shield interlocks with his. James's spellwork hammers from above. Dumbledore's magic folds in, old and bright. They look at each other, all of them, across the chaos, and a moment of understanding passes between them. This is not one boy's destiny. This is decades of resistance, of quiet choices, of a single defection that changed the shape of the board. Voldemort falls in the courtyard where the first years once learned to fly. But as the dust settles and the echoes fade, something in the wards shivers, as if the castle has one more secret it has not yet chosen to share. Who is Snape without the weight of Lily's death? The dust has not yet settled when he steps away from the battlements. Smoke, shattered stone, the faint metallic tang of magic burned too hot for too long. Severus Snape walks the ruined corridor alone, cloak torn, wand hand trembling, in a way he refuses to look at. In canon, this is where his story ends. A man whose whole life narrows to one moment in a Godric's Hollow cottage. One wrong report in a dingy pub that condemned the only person he ever loved. He has been planning this penance for years, bending every choice toward a single axis. Lily died, and it was his fault, and nothing he does can ever change that. Here, the axis is different. Lily lives. James lives. Harry, scraped and exhausted, is somewhere in the courtyard below, arguing with Hermione about ward theory and what the new ministry should look like. The prophecy was never delivered into Voldemort's hands by a desperate young Death Eater. Snape's greatest sin is not a single catastrophic betrayal, but the quieter, longer one, the years he spent wearing the mark at all. That difference rewrites how he looks at himself. He is still self-loathing, that is bone deep. He is still acerbic, still capable of cutting a seventh year to ribbons with one raised eyebrow and a single, precise word. But he cannot cling to the story that he is irredeemable when the world keeps insisting on contradicting him. When his intel broke a ritual circle in Wales and saved 3 families. When his warning forced the evacuation of Godric's Hollow and left Voldemort raging in an empty house. He looks at her. She looks at him. Years earlier, in Dumbledore's office, Lily had listened to his halting explanation, to the way his voice cracked when he described the first mission that sickened him enough to run. She had not forgiven everything, but she had believed he was done. That belief is its own burden. His guilt is subtler now, spread out over time. For the raids he brewed potions for before he broke, for the names he didn't have in time, the children whose beds were empty by the time the order arrived, for the way he once spat mudblood at a girl on a riverbank and taught her, for years, to doubt her own worth. The relationships that grow out of that are complicated, more than any description could contain. Lily respects him, but she does not excuse him. Their friendship is careful, bounded, full of things they both choose not to say. James tolerates him with a kind of wary, reluctant truce. The two of them occasionally found in the same kitchen at Potter Manor at 2 a.m, sharing tea and silence. Harry sees a man who snarls at sloppy work and quietly corrects his wand grip. A mentor who will never be warm, but will always be honest. Outside, the wizarding world shifts. At first, they remember the mark. They remember the trials. They remember that Dumbledore vouched for him. Slowly, they add new memories. The potions that kept curse victims alive. The strategies that broke the Lestrange ring. The spy who did not die for his change of heart, but lived to be seen, questioned, doubted, and finally, grudgingly, admired. He is not simple. He remains prickly, proud, difficult to like. But unlike his canon self, he is allowed to be something else as well. A man who changed course in time, who wrote a different ending for the Potters, and who now has to decide what to do with the years that choice has given him. So when the wards shiver, and the castle hints at one more secret, it is not just Harry and Hermione who turn toward it. Snape does too, already calculating, already imagining what new debt, or new chance, might be waiting in the stone. Who is Harry without the scar and the cupboard? The house is quiet and full of ordinary sounds. A kettle, an old clock, a child's laugh from the garden. This is Harry's world in this timeline. Not a cupboard under the stairs, but a kitchen table with 3 mugs, 2 parents, and a man who still moves like a spy, even when he is only passing the sugar. Canon Harry grows up learning that doors slam, that adults shout, that his needs are a burden to be hidden. This Harry grows up learning that arguments end in apologies, that wands are put away before voices rise, that fear is something you talk about, not something you sleep inside. The difference shows in how he looks at adults. Canon Harry flinches from authority, then throws himself against it when pushed too far. Because deep down, he expects to be punished, expects to be disbelieved. AU Harry has seen Dumbledore visit for tea, has watched order members argue strategy in the sitting room, has heard his parents say no to the headmaster and stay standing. He knows adults can be wrong without being monsters, powerful without being gods. So when McGonagall's letter comes, when the Hogwarts crest gleams and the owl taps the glass, he has been planning this, but not as an escape, as an expansion. A school, not a rescue. A castle, not a lifeboat. That shift changes his instincts. Canon Harry walks into every new room ready to be ambushed or underestimated. He survives by reading danger first and kindness second. This Harry is wary because he has grown up in a war-shadowed home, listening to names of the dead, watching his father polish a wand that has cast unforgivables in battle. But his first impulse is not suspicion. It is to ask questions, to collaborate, to look for the pattern his parents and Snape taught him to see. He is also less eager to throw himself away. Canon Harry's self-sacrifice is sharpened by years of being treated as less than. When you have been told you are nothing, it is easier to believe your death is acceptable collateral. AU Harry has been told, repeatedly, that he is wanted, that his survival was a choice, not an accident. When danger comes, he will still step forward, but he will argue for plans that let everyone walk back out. Yet some things do not shift. Courage runs like a stubborn thread through both boys. So does loyalty. Whether in a cupboard or a sunlit bedroom, he is still James's son, still Lily's, still shaped by stories of the Marauder's recklessness and Lily's unyielding fairness. Snape's harsh lessons add another layer: precision, restraint, the knowledge that power without control is just another form of cowardice. Without the scar, his fame is different. People know him as Potter's boy, as the child who toddled through order meetings, not as a savior. There are no strangers reaching to touch his forehead on the platform, no whispered legend wrapped around his name. That anonymity is a kind of freedom. He can decide whether he is a Quidditch player, a duelist, a scholar of magical lore, without prophecy breathing down his neck. If heroism comes for him in this world, it will not arrive as a scar and a story he never chose. It will be a decision made in full knowledge of what war costs, a path he walks because he believes it is right, not because the universe has cornered him. And that raises a quieter, more unsettling question, as the castle stirs toward its next secret, when a hero is not demanded by fate, but steps forward anyway. Is that not a different, deeper kind of power? The Marauder's legacy in a world where they lived longer. The kitchen is crowded and bright, full of steam and overlapping voices. A hand-painted chart of the moon phases hangs beside the family calendar. 10 years after Voldemort's fall, the Marauder's legacy looks very different from the one Harry once read about in old history books. Sirius Black is not a madman behind Azkaban bars. He is a man in motion, rarely still, living as if any pause might let the past catch him. He has been planning this life since the night the Dark Mark first appeared above Godric's Hollow, and then did not fall on his friend's home. He never goes to prison, because there is no betrayal to answer for. Instead, he finishes the war as one of Moody's most effective field operatives. reckless in a way that makes senior aurors grind their teeth and rookies stare. After the war, he refuses a desk, refuses promotion. He works as a freelance hunter for the Department of Magical Law Enforcement, taking contracts no one else wants, disappearing for weeks, then reappearing in the Potter's Garden with a new scar and a bag containing everything he owns. Harry watches him walk up the path, laughing too loudly, eyes too bright, and understands that survival is not the same as peace. Remus Lupin's path is quieter. His lycanthropy still closes doors, but the war has taught the world hard lessons about wasting talent. Dumbledore presses, gently and relentlessly, until the board accepts a compromise, a trial year at Hogwarts. Wolfsbane guaranteed a secure room in the dungeons. Remus arrives earlier in this timeline, teaching defense before Harry's first letter from the school ever arrives, building a reputation as the calm professor who knows everything about fear and refuses to let it define his students. And then there is Snape. Not their friend, never that, but not their shadow either. Years of shared missions, of potions brewed at impossible hours, of arguments in order safe houses while maps and casualty lists litter the table, grind down the edges of schoolboy hatred. Sirius still flinches at the sight of him. Remus still remembers being dangled over that werewolf prank like bait. Yet when Snape walks into a strategy meeting, cloak snapping, bringing fresh intelligence from a Death Eater circle he once called his own, even Sirius has to admit, if only to himself, that this man's courage is more than any description could contain. Their view of him shifts by inches. James trusts him first, because Lily does. Remus follows, because patterns matter, and Snape keeps choosing the same side. Sirius is last. One night, after a raid that nearly kills them both, they look at each other across a St. Mungo's ward, bandaged and exhausted. A moment of understanding passes between them. Neither says thank you. Neither needs to. Harry grows up inside this uneasy constellation. Parents who remember the front lines. A godfather who jokes to keep from breaking. A werewolf professor who tracks the moon on the kitchen wall. A former Death Eater who teaches him potion theory at the dining table and the cost of a single bad choice in the pauses between sentences. He looks at her. She looks at him. Harry and Hermione will one day compare these adults like living case studies in how to carry guilt and responsibility. In this world, the Marauder's legacy is not a graveyard and a framed photograph. It is complicated survival, frayed friendships that did not snap, and a boy who grows up knowing that heroism can look like coming back from the worst night of your life and choosing, again, to stand guard. Snape, awkwardly but undeniably, stands in that line with them, and the story of the next war will have to account for all of them still being there. The politics of forgiveness, how the wizarding world remembers Snape. The hall is dim and lined with portraits. Quills move on their own, scratching judgment into parchment. 30 years after the First War, Severus Snape lives in chapters and footnotes. History books do not quite know what to do with him. One page calls him a cautionary tale of radicalization, the next an exemplar of strategic defection. He crossed lines twice, first into darkness, then back into the light, and the writers keep circling that pivot, trying to pin down where redemption ends and where the limits of trust begin. In standard Hogwarts texts, his name appears in cool, careful language. A former Death Eater who provided critical intelligence to the Order of the Phoenix, instrumental in disrupting Voldemort's potion supplies, ward schemes, and recruitment. Subject of ongoing debate regarding post-war clemency. The words look neutral. They are not. Every sentence has been argued in committee. At the Ministry, those arguments never quite stop. In one packed Wizengamot session, a grey-haired witch from Magical Law Enforcement lifts his file, thick, frayed, held together by 3 brass clips, and says, softly, that Snape proves rehabilitation is possible. She lists dates, operations, lives, saved. She has been planning this speech for years, waiting for the moment when amnesty policy comes up again. Across the chamber, a pure-blood traditionalist with a polished cane counters that Snape's case is an anomaly, purchased by Dumbledore's patronage and Potter influence. Unique access, unique supervision, unique leverage. Not a precedent. They look at each other. A moment of understanding passes between them, not of agreement, but of how much they both lost the first time the dark mark burned. Policy drafts rise and fall on that fault line. Some propose structured paths for former Death Eaters, Veritaserum reviews, monitored service, restricted wand rights that can be slowly restored. Others insist that Snape's early defection, his relentless work under Dumbledore's eye, his willingness to walk back into danger again and again, are conditions that cannot be replicated by law. Out in the wider world, memory splits along age. Older witches and wizards who stood in St. Mungo's corridors waiting for news that never came look at his name, and feel the first betrayal more than the second allegiance. They remember raids, funerals, a boy in Slytherin colours who chose the skull and serpent. No number of successful countercurses will quite erase that first choice. The students see something else. For them, he is the strict but effective professor who can brew an antidote with 3 ingredients and a glare, who drills them on countercurses until their arms shake, who insists they know exactly what the dark arts do to a body and a mind. Some admire him, some fear him. Many simply accept him as part of the way the world is. Complicated. Scarred. Still teaching. Snape himself refuses the narrative. When an earnest young historian sends a letter asking for an interview for a book titled Shadows into Light, he writes back 3 lines. Do not simplify this. People died when I was on the wrong side. Remember them first. He rejects praise, bristles at any attempt to turn his life into a clean arc. In staff meetings, when someone references what you did in the war, he cuts in with what he failed to do, who he failed to save. He walks the castle corridors at night, cloak whispering against stone, passing students who will never know how close their world came to breaking. His legacy is not a statue in the atrium or a house renamed Prince. It is the quiet fact that certain names are not on memorial walls, that certain children grew up with parents because he walked away when he did. That is NEWT. Classes turn out witches and wizards who face darkness with open eyes, not romantic illusions. He looks at her. She looks at him. In one late-night conversation in the headmistress's office, Hermione suggests that someday the full record of his work should be unsealed. Not for glorification, for accuracy, for instruction. He studies her for a long moment, then says only, "You will do what you think is right, Lady Dagworth Granger. Make sure they understand the cost." Because in the end, the politics of forgiveness in this altered timeline are not about whether Severus Snape is liked. They are about what a society chooses to remember when it survives its own worst impulses, and what it chooses to forget. And as a new kind of war begins to form in whispers and unsigned letters, that choice is about to matter far more than anyone in that dim hall yet understands. Pattern interrupt. A quiet epilogue in the Hogwarts dungeons. The dungeon is almost silent. Only the scratch of a quill, the soft drip of distant water, the low, steady breath of a castle that has survived 2 wars. Years have passed since the last dark mark burned. The stone walls have been repaired, scorch marks smoothed away, old cracks woven through with quiet, stubborn magic. Severus Snape sits at his desk in the pool of a single candle, hair streaked with grey now, the harsh lines of his face softened, not by kindness, exactly, but by time. He has been planning this evening of solitude all week. No staff meetings, no patrols, only essays and the small, controlled world of red ink and parchment. A stack of third-year essays waits. Ingredients misordered, counteragents confused, theories half understood. He moves quickly, precise, his comments clipped. Inadequate. See text. You do not know what volatile means. Familiar rhythm, familiar armor. Then he pauses. One parchment lies slightly askew, as if it has tried to hide behind the others. The handwriting is cramped, determined. A muggle-born boy from a small town, always watching, always a fraction too slow to raise his hand. The instructions are followed, mostly, but the conclusion falters. A misapplied principle about stabilizing agents. Snape reads the last paragraph twice. He remembers another essay, another boy, insisting that if you believed hard enough, intent would correct technique. Potter, 15, arguing in the margins as if he could win by sheer stubbornness. He looks down at the current essay. He looks at the old scar on his hand, where a cauldron once exploded in a different war. He has been planning this too, though he would never admit it. The experiment of being slightly less cruel. His quill hovers. Instead of the single cutting sentence he hears forming in his mind, he writes, "Your reasoning shows promise." Review stabilizing ratios in Chapter 4. Ask if clarification is needed. The words look strange in his own handwriting, almost like a forgery. He adds, after a moment, "You are closer than you think." A knock at the door interrupts him. For an instant, the old reflex flares, wand, shield, calculation. The war taught him to count heartbeats between sound and danger. Now, there is only the soft creak of wood and the faint murmur of students changing corridors. "Enter," he says. The door opens. Harry stands there, older now, lines at the corners of his eyes. Aura robes exchanged tonight for simple green. No scar blazing, no lightning in his gaze. Just a tired man who has seen enough. Behind him, Lily leans against the doorframe, a stack of staff meeting notes in her hand, her hair threaded with silver that catches the candlelight. He looks at her. She looks at him. A moment of understanding passes between them, more than any description could contain. "We're finished," Lily says quietly, lifting the notes. "McGonagall wanted you to know the new ward scheme is in place. No one is sneaking cursed objects through the carriages this year." Harry steps further in, glancing at the essays. "Still torturing third years, Professor?" The humour is dry, but there is no sting to it. "Ignorance," Snape replies, "remains remarkably resilient." He hesitates, then nods toward the chair. "You may sit, if you insist on loitering." They talk a little. Not about prophecies. There was never one to shatter this world, but about old raids, about students who became healers instead of casualties, about a Death Eater trial that ended with testimony rather than Dementors. Harry mentions his son's first flying lesson. Lily rolls her eyes at a Ravenclaw who tried to quote Gringotts regulations to argue for extra library hours. They look at each other when one memory brushes too close to the edge, and let it pass. After a while, they leave. The door closes with a soft click. Snape sits alone again, but the solitude is different now. Textured by footsteps in the corridor, by staff room arguments, by the knowledge that in this repaired castle he is not an intruder or a penitent ghost, but a fixture. His life is still cloaked in shadows, stone, candle, the quiet discipline of work, yet he is, undeniably, part of the light he helped preserve. And that, more than any public pardon or Order of Merlin, is the real alternate ending this timeline grants him. Answering the core question, did early defection save more than the Potters? The castle is quiet enough that you can almost hear the balance sheets of fate turning over, not loudly, just the soft scrape of one man's earlier choice, rearranging an entire world. By now, the gains are obvious even to those who never liked him. The Potters live. There is no ruined cottage at Godric's Hollow, no baby's cot blasted apart. Harry grows up in a house where his father's laughter is a daily sound, where his mother's hand on his shoulder is an ordinary comfort, not a ghost. He has been planning this life without knowing it, every time he looks at the sky and assumes his parents will be there at dinner. Sirius never sees Azkaban. He walks the corridors of the Ministry instead, a slightly disreputable aura with ink on his fingers and dog hair on his robes, filing reports that actually mention due process. The First War ends not with a scream and a nursery rhyme, but with a series of raids where Snape's intel means safe houses are emptied in time, ambushes are turned, and massacres become arrests. People still die, but fewer die blindly. Dumbledore knows exactly what that cost him. An early defector Snape gives him maps, names, supply routes, potion recipes. He does not give him the prophecy, because he never hears it. There is no marked child, no scar that makes a boy into a banner. Voldemort falls harder and later to a network of auras, unspeakables, and reluctant allies, not to the wild magic of a cornered infant. And yet, this is not a clean world. Some Death Eaters escape, some trials fail. Families still receive the letter nobody wants, the one with the Ministry seal and the careful condolences. When Voldemort returns, because he does, more patient this time, less theatrical and more surgical, he returns to a society that remembers his first reign and still bears the bruises. Snape's early years in the mask cannot be unworn. There are faces in St. Mungo's who look at him and remember only the wand pointed at them. The difference is structural. The burden of salvation does not rest on one teenager's thin shoulders. It It is spread across adults and institutions that have been forced, by Snape's defection and the Potter's survival, to stay in the fight. The Auror office is larger. The Wiesengemot has been embarrassed into reform. Hogwarts trains its students for a world they know is dangerous, instead of pretending danger is a fairy tale. Harry still walks into battle eventually, but not alone, not as a child drafted by a rhyme. He looks at her. She looks at him. A moment of understanding passes between them as they stand in a war room rather than a graveyard. This is a choice, not a sentence. That is the thematic hinge. One man's earlier decision does not create utopia. It creates room. Room for James to grow from arrogant to responsible without dying in between. Room for Lily to become a researcher whose work on protective magic changes how wards are cast across Britain. Room for Sirius to be more than a cautionary tale. Room for Harry and his friends to decide what kind of heroes they are willing to be, instead of being told by prophecy what they must become. In this timeline, Snape does not only save the Potters, he saves the possibility that heroism can be shared, argued over, written into law and curriculum and quiet acts of courage, rather than burned into one boy's skin. More than any description could contain, that is the real magic of his defection. And it is not finished yet. What we lose without the boy who lived myth. The story shifts. Something bright that never quite existed here flickers at the edge of the frame and goes out. In the original timeline, a baby in a crib holds the whole war in his scar. A nursery rhyme wrapped around a murder scene. A prophecy muttered in a shabby pub becomes the spine of history, and the wizarding world clings to it, because it is simple, because it is terrifying, because it says that a child can defeat a tyrant, and somehow that makes the darkness feel like a story that will end. Harry grows up hearing he is the boy who lived, before he knows what that means. His name is a spell adults use to steady their hands. His scar is a banner. The myth does something quietly powerful. It turns a complicated, cowardly, brilliant, terrified society into an audience that believes, however faintly, that destiny has chosen a side. In this world, there is no cottage in Godric's Hollow blown apart around a crib. No rebounding curse. No headline that crystallizes a legend overnight. Voldemort falls for messier reasons. Failed rituals, fractured alliances, Snape's defection, Dumbledore's strategy. A dozen small acts of resistance that do not fit on a chocolate frog card. Children do not grow up with a single name to whisper when they are afraid. They grow up with lists of dates, battles, and laws. The loss is not only symbolic. Without the boy who lived, there is no unifying miracle to point to when the world looks at its own complicity. No easy story to tell a frightened 7-year-old about how evil came, and a baby survived, and that means goodness is stronger. Instead, parents have to say people made choices, some brave, some cruel, and that is why you are alive. He has been planning this, Dumbledore thinks. But the plan is not written in prophecy. It is written in fallible ink. For some witches and wizards, that absence curdles into doubt. If no child was marked by fate, then perhaps there was never any justice waiting beneath the chaos. Only winners and losers in a long, ugly struggle. The wars look less like a fated arc, and more like what they were, human beings with wands and grudges and fear. Hermione looks at the records in the bank and sees names, not legends. It is harder to believe the world will right itself on its own. And yet, that is where the gain hides. When you strip away the prophecy, you strip away the excuse to wait for it. Responsibility can no longer be outsourced to a boy with a scar. History stops being a fairy tale about a chosen one and becomes an argument about policy, education, and what adults owe their children. They look at each other. A moment of understanding passes between them. If no one is chosen, then everyone is. Both versions of the story answer different hungers. The canon myth says, you were saved by something larger than you, and that is comforting. This timeline answers, you will be saved, if at all, by what you choose to build. As we walk further into this AU, we are not asking what the prophecy demands. We are asking what happens when agency replaces omen. When a magical world built on stories has to live without its favorite one, and what Harry and Hermione decide to write in its place. What we gain, a Snape who lives with his choices, not his ghosts. The house is quiet and full of ghosts that never died. Godric's Hollow. Not a ruin, not a memorial, just a slightly shabby cottage, with toys in the garden and scorch marks on the shed, where James insists on testing new jinxes. Somewhere inside, Severus Snape is washing teacups with hands that once brewed poisons for Voldemort, listening to Harry argue with Lily about bedtime. Living with forgiveness, he is discovering, is more difficult than living with loss. Grief is simple. You drown. You build an altar in your mind and never have to move it. Guilt is a script you can recite in the dark. I killed her. I killed them. I deserve nothing. But in this world, Lily walks into the kitchen, passes him a towel, and says, "Severus, you missed a bit." Forgiveness is not an absolution. It is a daily, awkward, ongoing presence. He has been planning this penance for years without knowing its shape, imagining martyrdom, a lonely death, a letter of explanation clutched in someone else's hand. Instead, he has to walk into the Potters' sitting room every Thursday for order meetings and watch James Potter lean back in his chair, arms crossed, eyes narrowed, refusing to let him sink into self-hatred where no one can reach him. Because this Snape does not get to disappear into legend. Lily asks him, plainly, what he saw as a Death Eater. James demands details about raids, about who is still missing, about which curses he invented. Harry, 11 and too observant, looks up from his book and asks why anyone would follow a man like Voldemort. They look at each other. A moment of understanding passes between them. Snape realizes that if he lies, even by omission, he will be building the same kind of world that almost claimed him. So he talks, haltingly at first, then with a brutal, clinical honesty that makes the room go silent. This is how the mark was given. This is what was done in your name. This is what I did. He cannot retreat fully into the safety of being the tragic, misunderstood double agent. Because there is no double life anymore, only the long, exposed road of staying. And yet, there is quiet happiness threaded through it. A Hufflepuff girl perfects a difficult potion because he took 10 extra minutes after class. A former Death Eater's son chooses a different path because Snape looks him in the eye and says, "I know exactly what you were being offered." One evening, James mutters something dry about Quidditch strategy. Snape replies with a sharper quip about Gryffindor tactics, and Lily laughs. For a second, the sound holds more than any description could contain. Contrast that with canon, a lonely boathouse, a snake, memories spilled like a last confession into a boy's hands. A life understood only after it ends. Here, his story is not a secret tragedy uncovered in a pensieve. It is visible, complicated, lived under the wary, watchful gaze of a magical world that knows everything he did and watches what he will do next. This offers a different catharsis, not the clean, tragic nobility of the doomed spy, but the harder, slower redemption of a man who turned back early enough to see the sunrise and then had to keep standing in its light. The question is not whether he dies well. It is what he does with the years he never expected to have, and what happens when those years collide with Harry and Hermione's own plans for remaking the world. Viewer choice. When should Snape have defected? The room is quiet and full of candles. No jewel, no prophecy, just parchment and possibility laid out like battle maps. This is where the story pauses and turns toward you. Up to now, we have followed one precise line. Snape walking away from Voldemort in late 1979 or early 1980. Early enough that he has not yet heard the prophecy. Late enough that the First Wizarding War still looks, from the outside, very much like the world we know from canon, raids, fear, the Potters in hiding, Dumbledore stretched thin. He has been planning this, in our version. Not a single flash of conscience, but a slow accumulation of revulsion, missions that go too far, children targeted, Lily's letters unanswered in his pocket. By choosing this window, we keep the scaffolding of history mostly intact. Voldemort still rises, the Ministry still fails, the Order still bleeds. What changes is that one of Voldemort's sharpest blades quietly turns in his hand before the prophecy ever becomes a weapon. But it did not have to be this way. Imagine the first fork. Snape defects immediately after Hogwarts. No years as a marked Death Eater. No half step into darkness. He walks out of the castle with NEWTs and bitterness, and instead of a dark mark, a desperate visit to Dumbledore's office. In that world, there is no prophecy betrayal, because there is no spy in the Hog's Head. The Potters never become targets for that reason. Harry grows up with parents, with Sirius Free, with a godfather who actually sends him more than one letter a year. Snape's arc becomes less about atonement and more about prevention, less tragic perhaps, but also less searing. Second fork, he still joins the Death Eaters, still falls, but breaks the moment he hears the prophecy. He runs to Dumbledore before he runs to Voldemort. That changes everything and nothing at once. The Potters might be moved sooner, hidden deeper, or Voldemort might fixate on another child entirely. Harry's scar could belong to Neville. Snape's guilt would be different too, not for what he caused, but for how close he came. Third fork, he never defects at all. Not until after Godric's Hollow, after the boy who lived, after he has already given Voldemort exactly what he wanted. This is Canon's path, the one we know, the clean, tragic nobility of the doomed spy. So here is the question, which moment feels right to you? Not only as strategists of war, but as storytellers. Which timing makes the wizarding world's politics feel most real? The emotional cost most honest? The themes of choice and consequence most sharp? He looks at her. She looks at him. In our story, Harry and Hermione will eventually have to decide what to do with this earlier, living Severus Snape. They look at each other as they read old reports, as they walk past his closed classroom door, and a moment of understanding passes between them that is more than any description could contain. Tell us in the comments where you would draw Snape's line in the sand, and why. If this were your alternate history, at what point would you make him turn? If you lived here, imagining yourself in this rewritten wizarding world, the castle is quiet and full of watching portraits. Now imagine the camera pulling back, and, instead of Harry and Hermione in the corridor, it finds you. Not as you are, but as you would be in this rewritten world. Which generation do you fall into when Snape walks away from Voldemort years too early, and everything tilts around that choice? Maybe you are Warera, 17, 18, 19, a new recruit in the Order, clutching a wand that still feels too smooth in your hand. You sit in a cramped kitchen while Dumbledore speaks and Snape sits in the corner, arms folded, eyes lowered. You have lost someone already. A cousin, a friend from Hogwarts. You look at him and you know he wore the dark mark first. Is he a traitor who came crawling back? Or the only adult in the room who saw the abyss and stepped away before it swallowed him? Or you could be a student later, walking the same stone corridors as Harry Potter. Only this Harry is not a legend, just the quiet son of famous parents who somehow lived. No boy who lived story to grow up on. No bedtime tales of a baby defeating a dark lord. Instead, your childhood is full of different names. Moody, Longbottom, Snape. The adults talk about battles and informants and the night the attack on Godric's Hollow never happened. In the common room, the gossip is not about a scar, but about the professor who used to stand beside Voldemort and then did not. You sit in Snape's classroom. The air smells of asphodel and something sharper. He walks between the desks, robes whispering, voice cutting. To you, he is a difficult professor, brilliant and impatient. His temper is famous as his war record. On the blackboard, instructions. In the corner, a framed, yellowing letter from the ministry commending his service. You wonder which is the truer thing. He has been planning this lesson for days, every question a test, not just of your brewing, but of whether you will flinch when he looks your way. Sometimes Lily guest lectures on charms. She stands at the front, hair tied back, wand moving in precise arcs as she explains a shield spell she and James refined during the war. James and Sirius argue about Quidditch tactics in the stands on Saturday, voices carrying, half joke, half strategy. Harry watches them, half amused, half exasperated. He looks at her. She looks at him. A moment of understanding passes between them that is more than any description could contain. Or maybe you are their children's age, the next generation, born into a world that has already survived 2 wars and 1 early defector. You grow up hearing that one man's choice in a dark hallway changed everything. No prophecy delivered, no nursery attack, no orphaned savior, Heroism, to you, is not a single dramatic curse, but the quiet, terrifying act of going to Dumbledore first, instead of to the Dark Lord. In this life, where would you stand when you hear Severus Snape's name? Would you whisper? Would you argue? Would you defend? And, when the next choice comes, would you recognize it as your own? Pulling back the curtain, how this AU mirrors our own choices. The room is quiet and full of unsaid things. Snape sits across from Dumbledore in this alternate world, hands folded, dark mark burning under his sleeve, but not yet soaked in the worst of what it could demand. He has been planning this for weeks, measuring every word, every risk. On one side of the choice, Voldemort, power, the familiar gravity of cruelty. On the other, uncertainty, judgment, the possibility of walking a different road before the bodies pile quite so high. In that chair, in that moment, he is not unique. He is every person who realizes the thing they joined, or tolerated, or quietly enabled, is not what they told themselves it would be. A ministry department that looks away from abuse. A family that uses shame as a spell. A friendship group where the jokes cut deeper each year. The details change, but the feeling is the same. This is wrong, and I am in it. Timing wraps around his wrist like a second mark. If he defects now, before the prophecy, before Godric's Hollow, the world bends differently. Lily lives. James lives. Harry grows up with parents who argue over bedtime and Quidditch, not with a cupboard and a letter from a half-giant. The same act of conscience, spoken 3 months later, would still matter, but it would not stop that particular door from closing. A world saved from one horror is still scarred by another. That is the unsettling grace of this AU. It refuses the lie that redemption is a clean erasure. Snape cannot unsay the slurs he flung at Lily, cannot unbrew the poisons he handed to masked men, cannot give back the years he helped make more dangerous. What he can do here is choose differently while there is still something left to save. Not everything, just enough that the shape of the future changes. He looks at her, she looks at him. In this version, it might be in an order meeting years later, Lily across the table, eyes wary but alive. A moment of understanding passes between them. She does not forgive everything. He does not deserve everything. But Harry is upstairs, alive, arguing with Sirius about a broom. That argument exists because one man walked away a little sooner. The story presses a quieter question against the viewer. Where are the small defections in your own life? Not grand speeches in a magical bank, not blood inheritance revelations. Just the decision to step out of a conversation that is turning cruel, to write a letter to someone who is being isolated, to speak up in a meeting before the policy hardens into harm. You may never know everything your earlier courage prevented. You will always know when you stayed silent. Because this is not only a story about Severus Snape. It is a story about how any of us might change the trajectory of a shared world by making one braver choice, one conversation, one refusal, just a little sooner than we did last time. And from here we can walk forward and watch what that earlier choice truly costs and truly saves. Closing the book, recap, what ifs and next stories to tell. The room is quiet now, just the echo of choices that could have been. In this version of the war, the central thread is simple and devastating. Severus Snape reaches his breaking point early. Not in a smoky room above the Hog's Head, not with a half-court prophecy ringing in his ears, but on some nameless mission where he finally sees what Voldemort's victory will actually look like. He walks away before he ever hears the words about a child who might defeat the Dark Lord. He has been planning this in his own careful, frightened way, long before he knocks on Dumbledore's door. That one earlier decision reshapes everything. Dumbledore gains a defector years too soon, and instead of bargaining over Lily's life, he is testing potions, checking memories, weighing how much to trust a man who knows every Death Eater code and safe house. Without Snape carrying that fragment of prophecy to his master, there is no marked family, no fixed target. Voldemort still hunts, still kills. But Godric's Hollow never becomes a graveyard. James and Lily live. Harry grows up with parents who argue in the kitchen about wards and nappies instead of existing only in photographs. So the story bends. Harry's childhood is not a cupboard and a letter from nowhere, but a house full of quiet protections, whispered warnings, and a professor who looks at him across the table with a guilt Harry cannot yet name. The wars themselves divide differently. An ugly, grinding first conflict where Snape's information lets the Order win battles they lost in canon, then a long, uneasy peace, then a second rise of Voldemort, without the prophecy's script to guide him. The divergences from the books are sharp. There is no Boy Who Lived legend to distort Harry's face in the papers. No Horcrux scar burning on his forehead. No snake language marking him as other. Snape stands at the staff table as a fully acknowledged former Death Eater and strategist. Not a half-hidden penitent. Students know who he was, and who he chose to become. And when the final battle comes, it is not a school full of children improvising resistance around a chosen one. It is a council of adults, auras, unspeakables, reformed allies, with Harry stepping forward because he is willing, not because fate wrote his name. Which turn was your favourite to walk through? The altered First War, with raids interrupted and ambushes prevented because Snape speaks sooner? The awkward, brittle peace between him and the Potters at their kitchen table? Or the second rise of Voldemort, forced to move without a prophecy, facing a Harry who has been trained for this day instead of pushed toward it? From here, there are other doors we could open. What if Sirius had been the one to defect early, swagger turning into sacrifice before Azkaban ever claims him? What if Lily had been sorted into Slytherin, bringing Muggle-born brilliance and a different kind of mercy into that house until the war itself looks different? What if Dumbledore never hired Snape at Hogwarts at all, and their fragile alliance had to survive without the shelter of a classroom between them? If you want to see those timelines on screen, if you want to walk those corridors and stand in those dueling circles, tell us. Like this video if this quieter, earlier act of courage rang true for you. Subscribe so you do not miss the next branch in this magical history. And in the comments, write your own Snape defection timelines, your own small, earlier choices that could change everything. They look at each other, these worlds, and we will take the most compelling of your ideas and build them into the next long, cinematic what-if, more than any description could contain.